across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the show. Alex Phillips here with you, bright and early, a little bit husky. One might say it's a mellifluous tone, but with you for the next 4 hours. Fantastic to have your company. Well done you for being up so early. What is your excuse? Probably like me, you're doing it because you're earning money. And who can blame you? But wonderful to have your company. And how gorgeous it is. It's not very often I climb into bed at 8 o'clock at night and then the alarm goes off at 4. But I kind of feel like this could be the beginning of a new existence for me. I really enjoyed it. It's the first time in about 2 years I've actually liked London. There was nobody in sight. It was beautiful, like everything lit up. It looked like fairy town, twinkling lights, and just no one there to nick your mobile phone. It was actually really quite pleasant. So there you go. There's my life tip. If you, like me, hate London, just don't see it during the daytime. See it in the wee small hours when everybody else is in bed. Now, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined for the next 2 hours by a very old friend of mine. We haven't seen each other for a long time, but we're reunited on this glorious day. It's Mr. Duncan Barks. Good morning.
Morning.
We know each other from sort of the early days of UKIP 1.0.
Oh, a long time ago. Yeah. In fact, I was dredging the corners of my memory earlier to try and remember the last time or the first time I saw you, and that must be, or the first time I met you. That must have been 2011.
Yeah, it probably
Isn't
would
it?
have been about 20. Yes,
a long
gosh,
time
it would have
ago.
been Yeah. Right, I think it probably would have been around that time. Gosh, 10 years.
Well, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
And I always listen to you on the radio, which is good.
You liar.
No,
You
I do.
I do you? Yeah.
And your Substack, I follow that.
Do you follow my
No, I don't subscribe because obviously I'm Thai and half
Yeah,
Scottish.
no.
But,
the $4.99 a month, too big.
Yeah, well, it's the price of a pint where I come from, Alex.
That's my hook on Substack. For the price of a pint per month, you have unlimited me.
Yeah, and your YouTube channel.
Do I have a YouTube channel?
Well, you pop up on a screen somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, I don't have one. That's someone else's.
Oh, is it?
So apparently I've got Facebook accounts that I don't know about,
Right.
and I'm a TikTok star and I don't even own the app.
Someone impersonating you.
There's a lot of people making a lot of money out of my existence, and it's not me. So something's gone very wrong here.
Yeah.
Right, let's kick off. We've got a big question of today, and it's tied to a story here, where it turns out there's a neighbourhood in a UK city where 43% of residents over the age of 16 speak little to zero English. So we're talking about, what, 2/3 to 1/3 of people doing my maths at 6 a.m. That's shocking, isn't it? I'm not the next Carol Vorderman in many ways.
No, thank goodness.
Exactly. But North Evington in Leicester is reported to be home to 1,670 people across a dozen seats. It's a bus ride away from the centre of Leicester. Can't wait to visit. It's majority Muslim. And the North Evington and Rowlatts Hill grouping of households also includes Hindu, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists and Jews, according to the 2021 census. So English was spoken as the main language by 6,825 people. The first tongue, however, is a South Asian language. Others include French, Arabic, Portuguese, languages from Africa, West Asia, East Asia. But anyway, the top line here really is that 43% can't speak any English at all. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, I'm of a certain generation, which is, it works on two different levels. If you go to a country, even to visit it, you make a half-decent stab of learning the lingo, right? That's what my parents' generation did, and that's what I would do. I also believe if you come to a country and you come to live in a country, again, you should make every effort to learn how to speak the language. And there's no reason why not, with all of the technology that exists now, with stuff like ChatGPT, with the internet, this marvellous invention, you know, there's no reason why you could not get a basic grasp of the language of the country that you've come to live in.
Right, you could get Duolingo for free. There are other apps available, I'm sure.
Exactly. So I think it's, I'm interested in the psychology behind this. Is this because people simply can't be bothered? Is it because they think, well, actually, why should I? Because I don't want to learn to speak this particular language because people should communicate with me in the language that I know and I love.
Well, I think it's because they don't need to. I think it's simple as that. They don't need to. And very often, you know, Brits living abroad might find this, that they can move to, no offence, I do like a lot of Brits who live abroad, but if you move to somewhere in France, for instance, you might make a little bit of an effort, but you could probably, you know,
There'll
get
be an
on
expat community, won't
yeah,
there?
you can get on by without having to sort of be fluent in French. But the difficulty we have in this country is that people come here as an economic unit. They can just sit in their house, especially, look, I'm just going to say it, especially if you're given a council house by the government, which is great. You're not going to get that back at home where you come from. And you can sit there as an economic unit with a roof over your head, income coming in for all of your children or your dependents. You can sort of watch the TV station from your home country. You can get on FaceTime and speak to your relatives back at home. Take a flight back whenever you want.
Yep.
If you go to the doctor, you can have a translator.
Yep. Everyone
Everyone else on your street is from your country as well. So why would you? I mean, look, I've lived abroad a lot. And the three that really sort of spring to mind is China, Ghana, India. Actually, I've lived in China, Ghana, India, Kenya and Belgium, right? So when I was in India, did I try and speak a bit of Tamil? Yes. Is it the most impossible language on earth to learn?
Yes.
Second to Chinese.
Okay, yeah.
But I did try and, like, you know, get a few sentences. But I was working for a newspaper out there, so English language newspaper. Yeah. And also my colleagues spoke to me in English. So it's just like one of those things we think it's a nice thing to try and learn some courtesies. Well, so this is the thing. China, I went to China and I was like, well, I'm going to try and learn a bit of Chinese for the courtesies. Yeah, there's just no way. Even sitting in a taxi trying to give your home address is impossible because it's this tonal language.
Yes.
So you've basically only got about, 7 words or something, but it depends whether you go xie xie or xie xie.
Right.
And so even just reading my address out to a taxi driver, I'd be like, Bing dang lu, zhu zhao wei. And they'd be like, eh? And I'd have to get my colleague on loudspeaker, oh, Bing dang lu, zhu zhao wei. And he'd be like, Bing dang lu, zhu zhao wei. And I'd be like,
so given your experience then, and that's a really good example of China, and the Chinese language is remarkably hard to master.
Really hard.
How would you say, how does it compare with learning English, do you think?
I think English, when it comes down to the sort of nuances of English, is probably quite difficult. But it's one of those languages that wherever you're from on planet Earth, you've been exposed to it.
True. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's not... So, and I think a lot of people do learn it. In most countries you go to on Earth, even if you're sort of walking around the souks of Marrakesh, people will be able to speak English to trade with you. And most international... When two internationals speak to each other, the lingua francum's English. You don't get someone from Bulgaria speaking to someone from Morocco and using Chinese, you know, that most people...
It's a global language.
It's the global language. So I kind of feel that, and if you're living here, if you're being given a house by the government, for instance, because if you're not speaking English, you're not in a job, are you?
No.
Do you know what I mean? You're not sort of there being a productive member of society. If you can't speak English, even working on a production line in a factory is going to be difficult.
So we're saying that if people come to live in this country for whatever reason, there's no real necessity or incentive to learn to speak the language.
No, and this is exactly. I don't think there is, and that's our fault because, like I said, if you're going to be in a workplace in this country, you're going to need to speak English. Yeah. So this applies largely to people who are unproductive in society. And then what do? We're like, here you go, have a translator.
I was thinking about this driving in earlier, and it's a symptom, isn't it, of this country, Great Britain, who for many decades we've been a fair and tolerant country, right? We're not a nasty nation. We try and do right by people. We don't want people to feel neglected or left out. But now you could almost argue it's coming back to bite us on the backside because we end up in a situation where we have a chunk of people in this suburb of Leicester where 43% of them simply can't speak English because we've gone, oh, it's okay, you go to the NHS because you need healthcare, we'll do that for you. We don't want you to be poorly.
Yeah, don't pay for it, no medical insurance, and here's your translator.
And here's your translator. Yeah. We've made it easy. So where's the necessity? Where's the incentive for anyone to go, actually, I need to learn how to communicate with this nurse or doctor?
Right, and even if you come face to face with the judicial system, say you've got a criminal intent or one of your relatives does, there's your translator again. And not just that, there's, Sentencing Guidelines Council would say, well, you better have a softer sentence.
And dare I suggest, because this is basic human nature, this is not about demonising immigrants or whatever, but it's quite useful, isn't it? If you're told something you don't like hearing, you can say, I don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
Don't understand. How does that work?
Yeah.
This is a barrier.
Right, or you can say, oh, I didn't realise you're only supposed to drive 30 miles an hour because, you know... the cultural relativism, the blight of morality. What do you think about this? If you're listening, I want to know your thoughts. Do you have neighbours or relatives who don't speak the English language? What about you? Have you got a second home abroad and you don't speak their language? Should you learn the language of your host nation? Is that unrealistic? Let me know your thoughts. The number is 03444 991,000. Now, we don't have translators here at Talk. If it's French, I'm pretty sure I can communicate with you. But anything else, we're going to struggle. Yeah. So do try and use English in this circumstance. You can use that number as well to send a WhatsApp, preferably in English. But Tech Up Dave will be our translator, I'm sure. He's got every sort of app and technological kit known to man. 03444 991,000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note in whatever language of your choice. It may not be played out. 8722 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. Or you can tweet us using any language or any particular font or character you like on X at talkTV. Right, let's hit up the front pages. And what do you have for us, Duncan?
Well, there's some interesting stuff knocking around as always. We have the assisted dying bill making the front page of the Daily Express this morning. As you know, Esther Ranson, or Dame Esther Ranson, has been campaigning for the law to be changed. Daily Express this morning have this exclusive story. She's applauding a decision by GP leaders to end their opposition to assisted dying. Now, this was the Royal College of GPs, who had been the last major, I think it's fair to say, medical institution to stand against changing the law, and its council voted to switch to a position of neutrality after doing a survey of their members. So Esther Ranson is particularly pleased about that.
So what are your thoughts on assisted dying? Because I've noticed already that since it's being sort of chewed over now in the Lords and in committees in Parliament, the obvious is happening. It's being watered down. The need to have a High Court judge make the ruling is now essentially being shuffled off. Now they're talking about extending it to, well, if you've still got a year to live. There's been debate about mental health conditions. Without sounding quite dark, I'm pretty sure Esther Ranson had a diagnosis of you've only got X amount of time to live, and here she still is with us. So it's sort of, I've got huge amounts of reservations about this.
Me too. So before this really hit the headlines, my initial position about a year ago, about 9 months ago, would have been, do you know what? It's everyone's basic human right to decide if they want to end their life, particularly if they've got a terminal illness, right? Which might sound crass, but that was my position. I've done a Labour government, Alex. I've done a Starmer. I've done a Reeves. I've done a U-turn.
I love a U-turn. I think more people should U-turn in life.
And I'm now very concerned about it for the reason you just outlined, which is it's now being watered down increasingly. And you've got Kim Leadbeater, who is the MP who's bringing forward this bill, who seems increasingly, when she does media, really sensitive and quite touchy when people challenge her about stuff. And this is one of the issues that needs to be challenged, because this is such a shift. And I made this point a few weeks ago on somewhere else where I was working. The initial amount of time in Parliament to debate this came in at, I think it was 5.5 to 6 hours initially. That's all.
That's
5.5 to 6 hours to debate something that is so significant and such a shift in how this country runs.
Right. I also think language matters in this, because you'll find that the debate around this is using such cosy language, dignity in dying, assisted dying. This is legally changing something which has existed in the UK since time immemorial, which is, can someone else kill you? Basically, the fundamental of this is, can someone give you lethal medicine that you would have to administer? But then the problem you find then is the sort of people who you kind of think, well, I get why you might want to shuffle off your mortal coil, may not be able to administer it themselves.
But Alex, it's spin, isn't it? You've hit the nail on the head. It's complete spin, and you and I know a little bit about this, given our past work all over the place. But it's spin, and you're right about the language. It's like something else that's been creeping in recently, which is irregular immigration. It's like, it's not irregular, it's illegal.
It's breaking and entering.
Exactly. So the use of the word dignity in dying starts to shift the debate, doesn't it? Because if people like me come along and go, I'm really concerned about this, then someone can quite easily turn around now and go, oh, right, you don't want people to have dignity when they're dying. And it's like, that's not what I said. I just have concerns about how this is playing out. So you're right, the language has changed, the debate has shifted. It's worth making the point, the Daily Express are fully behind this. They've had one of their crusades for the last few months. And the Express do this really well, where they pick on an issue. They do the same with farmers. They're against the family farm tax. With this, they've got their crusade. They think that the law should be changed, and they're supporting Kim Ledbetter with what she's doing, which is why they have this exclusive on their front page.
When I started looking into this, the thing that really alarms me, so my darling late uncle died of MS, and he considered Switzerland, you know, because it's a really brutal condition. And whenever we open this up to people sort of phoning in and talking to us, so many people phone in and say, you have no idea, you know, if this was you, if you had my life or my husband's life, your views would change. And I always say, well, you know, I haven't, but I've seen with my incredible late uncle what he went through.
Yeah.
Now, he was a brilliant technologist. He was brilliant in IT. He used to work with Bill Gates. And so he was able, until his last hours, essentially able to work because he was able to have a computer screen projected onto the ceiling of his bedroom, and he was able to sort of use sort of small movements to do all sorts of like crazy projects. Like I think it's downloading brains to cure dementia and things like this. The problem is a lot of people have no good end-of-life care. No. And when you look at the funding that goes to hospices, so I've now become the world's biggest, not the world's biggest hospice funder, but that's those are the charities now. Yeah. Someone's like, give money to a hospice. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Right. Because I didn't realise that a third of their funding comes from the government, which is almost nothing, zero. Basically, it's coins down the back of the sofa. 2/3 of it come from people, you know, going to charity shops. And that is basically any one of us could end up in a situation where we have to be moved to a hospice, and people there make sure you have dignity in dying.
They do amazing work, and you're right to highlight it. And then you have to roll into this the fact that we now have a government who, in their last budget, decided to increase employers' national insurance contributions and the minimum wage, which is hitting a lot of the care sector, including hospices. Yeah. Couldn't make it up.
You couldn't make it up. I think it's absolutely cruel that they're standing there in Parliament debating whether or not, you know, doctors should be legally allowed to help people bump themselves off, when they're not saying, first of all, let's make sure end-of-life care is as brilliant as it can be. Now, we're going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to hit you up with even more front pages. There's so much more to discuss. Now, if you want to send in your thoughts, the number to WhatsApp me, 0344 499 1000. You can leave me a voice note as well. You can use that number to call, register your interest. We're going to vet you, and if you're lucky, you'll be patched through to the studio to speak to Duncan and I live on air. You can text me, old school, 87222. Remember to write the word talk before your text. That way it pings the masts on top of Talk Towers. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back just after this.
You're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault, that there's no growth.
Well, it is.
I don't
She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years, it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, shall we go to some of your messages? I say that because one of them is just showering us in glory.
Marvellous.
Marvellous, yes. Alex and Duncan, this is Francis from Wilton in the glorious county of Wiltshire, which I know extremely well. Oh, thank you, Dave. Look, Dave's just brought us in a... Phil Dave. Oh, sorry, Dave. Tech up Dave, Phil Dave. Everyone's got Dave in their name in this studio. Yeah. Anyway, Francis from Wilton says, it's 6:23. What a wonderful surprise.
A lot of people around here called Dave. Have you noticed?
There's Tech Up Dave and then there's Phil Dave. So there's like first name Dave, surname Dave. I was about to call you Dave then.
Call me whatever you like, Alex.
We're all Dave. Yeah, basically, when you pick up the phone, 03444991000, if you say, good morning, Dave, there's a sort of 50-50 chance you might hit one. Like, so Francis and Wilton says, what a wonderful surprise this morning. Alex, you give so much energy and geopolitical nous. We haven't even got on to my sort of worldly wisdom yet. With the sage and droll, Duncan.
Sage?
Sage and droll, yeah.
I'm normally called other four-letter words.
Sagacious. Sagacious. Morning, Alex. If they can't speak English, they obviously do not contribute to society or the economy. Exactly. Therefore, they're living on the state. This country is being taken for a ride. And decent, hard-working people pay the price. Exactly. That's your tax. It's my tax. Yep. It's a ridiculous amount of tax now that goes towards people who aren't working. I mean, just not necessarily from abroad, from the UK as well. I can't know what the statistic is.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know the stats.
Quarter of the entire budget of the Treasury or something is now.
I won't be the only person. I know you'll be in the same mindset, but just the vast amounts of tax that we are forced to pay, and I kind of take a relatively pragmatic approach. If I see it being put to good use, I don't mind too much, but I don't.
But no, that's what really gets my go. Although I tell you what, I am so sort of battle-scarred from living in Belgium. It feels like being in the Cayman Islands in the UK. Right. Have you ever seen their tax rates living in Brussels? Mind you, saying that, I don't know why I say that, because I actually worked for the European Parliament, so you actually pay a nominal tax of about 5%. Yeah. But just knowing from reading the papers over there that everyone else, you earn like 20k in Belgium and you're being taxed 60%, and madness. Anyway, someone sent in. Guess who sent this in? Dave. Dave has sent this message.
Dave.
It's interesting.
Is this Dave number 3? So Dave 1, 2 out there, number 3 on the text.
Third Dave. Yeah. And you know what they say when you hit your third Dave? No. It's a rave. It's interesting that despite providing free services like trips to football stadiums and driving lessons for migrants, the councils haven't offered English language lessons. I bet they have, actually. I bet they do, along with their sort of, pantomime ponies, yoga and PlayStations. Yeah. Right, OK.
Well, just picking up on that, Alex, and we should. And I think you're right. I certainly read a report saying that English language lessons do get offered as part of a way of integration. But if they're not being accepted, or they're not being taken up, that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. It should be mandatory. Yeah. Should be absolutely mandatory. OK, so what else are we going to chinwag about today from the newspapers?
Well, one of my pet topics, if I may, is the explosion of self-service checkouts in supermarkets. I hate them. I despise them. I find it really, really offensive that I give my custom to a particular shop, and they reward me by expecting me to scan my own items and pack my own bag.
Right, and then what you've got is a load of people just lift stuff from the shelves.
Yeah.
So you go, we can't be bothered paying stuff. Yeah. What we're going to do instead is put even more, put the prices up. Yeah. So you do the work that we should be doing, and then loads of people nick stuff.
Yeah, I hate them, and I think we should boycott them. And I started doing it now. I will happily queue for 5 minutes to
keep Gladys in her job.
I'm just going to say, you can't say manned anymore, can you? A personed checkout.
Woman's, come on, it's always a nice woman behind a checkout.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I'd rather queue and be served by a nice woman behind the checkout than I would use one of these machines. Because one, they never work properly. Right?
Unexpected item in bagging area.
Exactly that.
Yes, that's the one.
And the other thing I don't like about them is they film you. So they all
yes!
you've got a camera. And so I've got a local co-op, and they have a little camera, and you can see yourself on the screen in front of the self-service thing. I've got a Waitrose that does the same. I find it highly offensive because it's almost
Londoners still?
No.
Oh,
no.
I'm going to tell you what's happened to Co-op in London. So the Co-op on my road in London is now like Fort Knox. Yeah. You can only enter through the exit. The other one is like barricaded. Yeah. And they've actually got things like lamb chops and steaks in these plastic cases with security tags. Yeah. Yeah. Because everyone just goes on the rob.
So in answer to your question, I don't live in London, and I wouldn't live in London now if you paid me, and it resonated with me earlier what you said. The best part of London is this morning because there's not many people about.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good.
But even though you've got Sadiq Khan's sniper-like speed cameras along the A3 as you drive in, but apart from that, it's nice and quiet, which is good. But no, I don't live in London. I live in the wilds of West Sussex. But even there, we have Co-op security guards and we have CCTV. But going back to the self-service checkouts, what they do is they almost work on the basis that you're guilty until you're proven innocent, because they're filming you. It's almost like, not only are we going to force you to use these checkouts, but we're going to film you as well because we think there's a good chance you might nick stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, the reason I want to talk about it is there's a load of pensioners in Bridgewater who are rebelling.
Solid Somerset people.
Yeah, absolutely that. And it's a Marks and Spencer store in Bridgewater. They've got 10 self-service checkouts sitting in a row, waiting to be used. There's one manned checkout, however, has a queue several people deep. And there's 59-year-old resident Anthony James, who says, if there's someone on the till, I would rather wait 4 or 5 minutes to have a conversation.
Oh,
now,
he's your kindred spirit.
He is. And this gets you into the other area, which is it's not just about the technology. For a lot of people who are living on their own, who are older people, going to the shops is it's a chat.
Yeah.
And you don't get that from a machine, apart from there's an unidentified item in your baggage area. So you've got about 20 pensioners who are on this online forum who have decided they're going to get together and just go, right, we're not going to use these machines.
I love this.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
I back this. I support this wholeheartedly. This is amazing. I used to be a checkout girl. Have you ever been It worked in the supermarket.
I've never been a checkout girl. A long time ago. Yeah. Not a supermarket. My first ever Saturday job was behind the counter of a Circle C convenience store.
What's that?
Well, it was a convenience store. The brand doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, so it's
I worked at Safeway.
Oh, right.
With Fred West's daughter. Claim to fame.
Right, okay.
I know, yeah.
This conversation's taken a turn I hadn't banked on.
No, I worked at Safeway, and I tell you what. So even back then, I remember the most annoying thing is someone would write a check. So checks don't even really exist anymore. No. But when people used to pay for shopping with checks, and you have to stand there and feel it all out like this. But then on a quiet day, when you're stuck at a checkout, you can't speak to the person behind you because they're all sort of facing in the same direction. So you're just looking at the back of someone's head.
Yep.
And you can't be listening to music or, that was before mobile phones, because that's how ancient I am. Yeah. So you'd just be sat there like that. And when you saw someone come to the end of your till, you're like, get in, And then what you'd find is they'd just sort of look every other way but yours. Like, hello, would you like help with packing? And you're the one going please talk to me.
I always say to whoever serves me, hello, how are you?
Yeah, I always love a
because I think that's polite, and two, I'm always interested in the answer.
That's because, are you originally a Londoner?
No.
Exactly, that's why you talk. This is the thing, Londoners, don't talk to anyone else. I like a good chat.
So the Bridgewater Senior Citizens Forum are leading the way with their rebellion against automated checkouts. Glenn Burrows, who's a member of the group, leading the boycott, says the face-to-face checkout tills might be the only conversation some people have all day.
Yeah.
admitting that she is now applauded by the till workers when she goes to pay for her shopping. The 75-year-old adds that her main reason for starting the campaign was to highlight the importance of protecting jobs. And that's the other side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I've noticed, so I live in Chichester in West Sussex, right? You know, and it is an affluent area. We have a Waitrose, though we don't yet have a Gales.
I was going to say, if you've got the Gales.
No,
when you get the Gales, it's time to move on.
Well, we ended
when
up
the Remainers move in.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we ended up with a Lib Dem MP last July.
I bet you did.
So I think the Gales is only,
it's coming.
It's only months away.
Yeah.
But the Waitrose there recently ripped out a load of the checkout tills and replaced, must have been about 8 of them, I think, with at least a dozen to 16 of the automated things. And I absolutely hate them.
Yeah.
I despise them. And I think, one, you know, from a personnel point of view, and I get it, you know, John Lewis partnership who own Waitrose, their financial results, it's been challenging time over the last few years. So if you're an accountant, you might look at this and just go, do you know what, we can save some headcount here and just get some self-service checkouts in. But I think 2 things. 1, people are losing their jobs, and 2, I think it's a real disservice to customers.
Yeah.
It is highly offensive, the idea that I'm expected to scan my own packaging and my products and pack my own bags, when actually, you know, in the past there was someone there to do it for you. And I don't think I'm particularly snobbish to say that. And I think what we're going to see is in about 20 years' time there'll be a load of, you know, consultants and analysts sitting around somewhere at some of the major supermarket chains going, we've done some market research, Tarquin, and Tarquin will go, what are the results, Philippa? And Philippa will say, we realised that customers really like it when there's someone to serve them. Oh, well, what we could do is bring back the manned checkouts.
Yeah, wouldn't that be revolutionary? Oh, my God. But also people go, why is there a mental health crisis? Because of stuff like this.
Yeah.
Humans are supposed to talk.
Yeah.
And that's why you're tuned in to talk, right? And on that note, if you'd like to join the conversation, the number to call is 03444 1000. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note. You can text me 87222. Write the word talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. And we're back after this.
Unexpected item in bagging area.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know, some of the perks of being up so early on this Saturday, particularly as I've got some sort of, lurgy yet again, is that I get the company of Duncan Barks, and I've been able to be live updated about the Formula One qualifying, because it's the very first race of the season.
Right.
And McLaren won too. You don't care about Formula. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your eyes.
I was trying to feign interest there, Alex, but
no.
you spotted my fakery.
Lando Norris, he's our, young British next world champion of the future.
Right.
Not Max Verstappen, basically.
Is Nigel Mansell racing on this one?
He's not. Red 5 was put into retirement, and the second Red 5, which is Sebastian Vettel, also in retirement. So you're about, 2 decades out.
Yep.
Right, let's go to the phone lines, because we've got Jackie in Oldham. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. This question you've posed, I think there's a twofold problem with it. Number one, we've had mass migration which has been imposed on us, and we've allowed parallel societies within various areas up and down the country, and we've not made any requirements on the people coming into the country for integration, assimilation, etc. So you've got societies that are carrying on with their own customs and traditions and don't feel the need to speak the language, because, as you said, we bring in interpreters. But there's another point to this. We've also got a system in this country where we're self-loathing. We're losing what our country and identity is. So when people come into the country, if we don't like ourselves, why should they try to be British?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Duncan, I'm going to spice this up a little bit, because I remember back... David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, talked about parallel societies. Even Angela Merkel spoke about the lack of integration. Yeah. And yet, if they knew back then, how on earth have we now had absolute unfettered migration to the point that we're grossing over 1 million?
Yeah.
When David Cameron said it was, I don't know, what, like 100,000 or something, 200,000?
Well, he talked about reducing it to tens of thousands, didn't he? That was his pledge. So I think there are a couple of things here.
What's going on?
Well, I think this country got reliant on cheap imported labour to a degree in certain industry sectors. I also think there was a climate that was created under the Blair-Brown government, so New Labour, 1997 to 2010, where... and I remember this, hosting radio shows all over the place, where if you started to question the level of immigration, there was a climate where you were automatically branded as racist, right? Yeah. And that climate has shifted now, and I don't know why it shifted. I think maybe the balance has tipped, and people can feel comfortable to say, do you know what? I think this is wrong. I accept we might need people from other countries to come to this country and do certain jobs because there's a labour shortage, etc. However, I am concerned about the very high level. But I think, to answer your question, there was a climate that was created where it became almost unsayable to talk about what people would see as the high levels. What I don't get
is what level of numbskullery decided it was okay to bring all your dependents. So Dubai is a city that's basically been created in the last 5 minutes by migrant workers, but they don't go with their entire families. They leave their families back at home in India and then go and work for pretty rubbish pay, but it's still better than they get paid back at home. They'll go for a long season and then go home. How come we've got a situation where for every care worker from Zimbabwe, 10 dependents have come? People come in to study a master's and they're bringing their neighbour, their dog walker, their babysitter, and their sort of aunt's third removed.
Well, I'll give you an answer. I think it goes back to a point that we made earlier, which was when we talk about people not speaking English in this country. We are a fair and tolerant nation, and people have taken advantage of that. I honestly think it's that simple. And
we've gone too far, though. If you go to the ironically named Whitechapel in London, honestly, both parts of that name are totally wrong. You come out of the tube, and it's written in sort of Arabic.
Yeah, I've seen that.
What's going on here? That's almost basically saying, well, we give up now. This is no longer an English neighbourhood. We're just going to hand it over.
But it goes back to this mindset, which is, well, let's try and be fair, let's try and be tolerant, and let's make people feel welcome. But it's had, in some cases, the reverse effect. I also think there's a conversation here to be had about our civil service and our Home Office, who do seem remarkably lax when it comes to putting the interests of this country first.
Now, you talk about the Home Office, the civil servants. What about the judges? Because that leads us very neatly onto a story in the Express that apparently Labour is considering cracking down on the use of the ECHR to block deportations of illegal migrants. Now, we have been pampered, haven't we? We have been absolutely indulged with stories in recent months about chicken nuggets. Can't go, my son don't like them chicken nuggets. Of you know, I'm a rapist and they frown upon that back where I'm from, so I better stay here. Oh, I've just decided to convert to terrorism, which means if I go back to Nigeria, they're going to arrest me. I mean, it's just mental now, mental, the list of excuses. And you're finding people challenging deportation rulings 5-6 times, every time both sides of the argument, funded by the taxpayer. And apparently Yvette Cooper said, well, you know, all these judges using the ECHR to block deportations, maybe they should have another thing. She wants to review how Article 8 is being applied in immigration courts to make sure the law is being interpreted in a sensible way. She's reviewing how other countries like Denmark interpret the law. They've cracked down on illegal migrations. Now, what I don't get about this is surely this is within the gift of the judges of how they interpret this law. At the end of the day, the judge is the judge and will judge as the judge sees fit. And when the ECHR, people forget this, when the ECHR turned round to Britain about 20 odd years ago and said, right, you need to give all prisoners the vote or else. Did we do it? No.
No, and David Cameron was on the record saying that he opposed it, but he led the way in some ways in terms of the opposition to it. We don't have, I mean, you've got to remember the people who run this country now who are in government are, and particularly in the case of our current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, you know, he is someone who is up to his neck in using the law in a certain way for a certain set of outcomes. And this is the problem. It goes back to what I said a few moments ago. We have a Home Office, we have civil servants, and we now, as you rightly pointed out, have a judiciary that will always come down on the side of the person they consider to be the most vulnerable. But there's no one in this country who could seriously believe that it's acceptable to avoid deporting an Albanian criminal because his son had an aversion to foreign chicken nuggets. There can't be anyone who seriously believes that a Pakistani paedophile who was jailed for child sex offences but escaped removal from the UK as it would be, quote, unduly harsh on his own children. I mean, anyone, you walk down the street where I live, you know, in the middle of Chichester, and you ask people about this, they'd be going, no, they carried out those crimes. They have no right to be in this country anymore. Boot them out. We do not have a judicial system that is representative of common sense thinking, the majority thinking in this country.
But I just don't understand, because these people must have common sense. They're intelligent people. They've got to the top of their profession. So then, to me, it becomes willful.
It might be willful. It also might be that they don't want to make it on the front page of The Guardian as being the nasty judge that sent some bloke back to another country and forced his kids
But they'd be on the front page of the Telegraph and the Times and the Mail and the Sun with like accolades.
But also I suspect they would be widely condemned, wouldn't they, by their friendship circle and the dinner party circuit that they no doubt inhabit. This idea, well, why did you do that, Jeremy? You know, that's an awful thing to do. And we're seeing it tip. We're seeing it tip, aren't we? We're seeing people in this country, law-abiding people like me, like you, who just go, enough of this stuff. We have had it up to our necks with this. We need some common sense thinking, which then gets us into where we are with, for example, Reform UK, who are doing pretty well in most opinion polls at the moment. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's a tipping point now where people are going, do you know what, I've had enough of this. We had a Conservative government for 14 years. Frankly, they took the mick. We got a Labour government. The first several months have been absolutely appalling. A plague on all their houses. I'm going to throw my lot in with this lot. And that's why you're seeing Reform doing well in the polls, because I think people are fed up with it. What is interesting here about Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, reviewing how Article 8 of the ECHR is being used, I think this is about trying to get one up on the Tories and on Reform.
It's parking their tanks in
exactly, because they're, you know, in some of they're certainly second in some of the polls that I've seen, Labour, with Reform out ahead. In some they're, you know, depending on the polling company, they're in third place. This is a clever way, isn't it, of going, we get it. And there's probably a couple of percentage points in this. We're going to look at this bit of legislation and how it's been abused. It's all right. Vote for us because we understand. That's what I think is going on here. I don't think they believe it.
No.
I don't think they want it.
No, it's a bit like the Sentencing Guidelines Council when they came up with their two-tier justice system. Go Shabana Mahmood the opportunity to go, I'm an ethnic minority and I find this disgraceful. But then they go, oh, it's a quango. Yeah. So anyway, talking about Reform UK, we are going to be discussing them in more detail after this break. So do stay tuned.
You're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
But normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello. Do you know, we've been read the riot act by Mr. Dave. Not Tech Up Dave, Mr. Dave, because we failed to actually go through the front pages. So shall we do it? Here we go. What's in the news today, Mr. Barks?
Well, Alex, front page of The Sun, there's a football story. Well, I'll leave that to our chums at TalkSport to do that justice. The Guardian this morning, Prime Minister Putin must not play games over ceasefire. Keir Starmer has warned that Vladimir Putin cannot be allowed to play games, quote unquote, with the possibility of a ceasefire in Ukraine as he prepares to present proposals for a peace deal to a coalition of about 25 world leaders. That's the main story.
I'm sure Putin is cowering underneath his big white table in the headquarters of the Kremlin.
Yeah, they've also got a little bit on the front page about more than 20,000 jobs at risk in NHS reforms. And there's a story on the inside, of course. During the week, it was announced that NHS England is disappearing.
What do they do? No one's able to tell me. I was covering it all day yesterday. Everyone who came on, I said, what do they do?
Yeah.
I even asked Stephen Doll, who's former health minister.
Yeah. Did he know?
I said, no, I didn't answer the question, but what do they do?
I did a stint working in public affairs for the NHS for a year, and I had to leave it for my own sanity, right? And it was we have 42 of these things across the UK across England rather, called integrated care boards. So I worked for NHS Sussex, then there was NHS South East, then there was NHS England. So literally 3 layers.
Like the Russian doll of bureaucracy.
Exactly that. And that's before you get into kind of like, the Brighton Hove Primary Care Trust or whatever. Absolutely nuts.
Right, well, there we go.
That's The Guardian. Front page of the Mirror is the Cheryl Tweedy story. I've come to get Cheryl, convicted killer who stalked her by turning up at her home yesterday, was jailed. That's their front page. Daily Star. Do you believe in Nessie? Loch Ness Monster?
Do you know, I like to believe in everything. I just think belief is such a fun thing to have. Disbelief is so boring.
I really want the Loch Ness Monster to exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it would just be great in this age of technology and everything. It turns out that there's just been this thing knocking around in the depths of the Loch Ness for decades.
Yeah.
Front page of the Star, high-tech monster mission will search every nook and cranny of the Loch. Nessie, we're coming to get you.
I love the fact that there are people really deeply committed to this, that they're sort of, throwing all the tech at it, like hundreds and hundreds of years, and no one's seen that thing. And it's like, well, we better find it.
No, well, you see,
the belief is great.
It is great. And what is interesting, in the world of journalism and Fleet Street, as old gits like me would call it, this is one of the hardy perennial stories. It's this, and also Lord Lucan. We think we might have found him in the outback of Australia.
He's in Australia. That man's in Australia. I'm telling you right now. He's in Australia.
Daily Star. Daily Mail's got this story about Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons. It's interesting you say that. I've noticed a lot more interest in Lindsay Hoyle over the last couple of weeks. And the headline is Hoyle handed lobbyist pass for Commons. And they're making this point on the front page of the Mail. They say he's embroiled in a new row. That's up for debate because no rules have been broken here, is the point we have to make. But the Mail's reporting he recruited a former lobbyist who gave him several all-expenses paid junkets. Right. And he seems to like going to Gibraltar. That's what we're discovering here.
This is. I mean, he obviously strenuously denies he's done anything wrong. Yeah. But what I've noticed is there's a pattern now with Lindsay Hoyle and his flights, Lindsay Hoyle and his cars, Lindsay Hoyle and his jet set lifestyle, and that someone at the Mail's decided that it's time to take down Hoyle for some reason.
I think you're right. What's interesting when you look at the inside pages of the Mail, you will not find a single MP speaking out against him because, of course, politically that's suicide from a career point of view.
On the surface, he's very likeable, whereas Burko might have been entertaining, but was not. But I will never forget that sort of, broom cupboard conversation. It was all about the sort of Palestine, the Gaza votes, wasn't it? About whether there's an amendment tabled or not, about ceasefires. And there was a sort of stitch-up in a back cupboard with him. And this is when the Tories were in government, and there's a stitch-up with the Labour Party. And I thought to myself then,
It is interesting. So you won't find any MPs going on the record to criticise him jetting off to Gibraltar or indeed some of the other junkets, one of my favourite tabloid.
Why does he need to do that when he's the Speaker?
I don't know. But you will find the excellent Taxpayers Alliance calling him out and saying, look, a lot of these junkets you're going on, mate, are funded by taxpayers.
Well, yeah.
And he won't fly economy either.
Oh, well.
iWeekend, their front page, Ukraine children stolen by Russia. Now Musk cuts the team that rescues them is their exclusive story. They talk about the elite team which finds Ukrainian children seized by Russia and helps to bring them home, has had its funding removed by the US government amid Elon Musk's cost-cutting drive.
I do think it's tragic when you've got things that USA might have been paying for that we all go, well, that was a great thing to be paying for. But at the same time, it has exposed how much the world goes, come on, America, cough up. Why aren't you putting your hand in your pocket?
Completely.
It's,
And then that gets us into the whole defence debate as well. I mean, I can warm to Trump on some things he's done, some other stuff I find it a bit unpalatable, but I'm fully behind him. The idea that for decades European countries have not paid their fair share into NATO in terms of defence spending is exactly right. Yeah. Front page of the Times, 1 million to have disability benefit cut by Labour is their story. story. 1 million people face having their benefits reduced under an overhaul of the welfare system. That means only the most severely disabled will qualify. They're talking about cost-cutting reforms that we're due to hear about and get announced next week, are set to deny payments to many people with mental health conditions and those who struggle with washing, dressing themselves and eating.
See, this is where, like, when it comes to a lot of people gaming the system, and I think this happens a lot, and a lot of young people who go, because I think the biggest cohort now off work due to mental health are the young, and it's like, come on, just get off the wormholes online, get into a, you know, have a gossip at the water cooler and you'll be a lot better.
Or as my old mum would have said, pull your socks up.
Yeah, my mum would be like, go to school, mingle with your friends, and you'll feel a lot better by break. Yeah. But it's true, isn't it? All these people, I can't go to work. I mean, get a life. But when it comes to people who genuinely do need welfare payments, it boils my blood that the Labour Party are going after cutting those benefits while we're sort of rolling out the red carpet and giving driving lessons and hotel rooms to migrants.
I think that's a fair point. And you're going to see a rebellion with this. There are a lot of newly elected Labour MPs who got elected in July of last year who will not put up with this because they did not become Labour MPs, or indeed before that Labour councillors in the first place, to vote through a load of cuts to benefits.
Right.
I think it's a massive issue coming down the track. So that's the Times, and the Telegraph this morning. It's got a, well, I don't know, there's a picture of Nigel Farage there. Is that unedifying? Is that a cheeky chap look? It's at Cheltenham. And there's
it's quite sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, he's sticking out his tongue, and he's got a betting slip in his hand. And there's a little picture in the corner of Rupert Lowe, and the headline here: Reform's big guns go head-to-head at Cheltenham. This is the ongoing, I think we can call it a public spat between the Reform Party UK leader and, well, what he used to be one of their MPs is now an independent, Rupert Lowe, who's had the whip withdrawn. And they're talking about both of them sitting within yards of each other at Cheltenham yesterday. Now,
I think we're probably going to have to dig into this later on the programme as well, but shall we get the ball rolling? Because both of us have worked with Nigel.
Yeah.
We've both sort of been his
I dragged him out of a plane wreck in 2010.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort
As
of...
everyone keeps reminding me.
Yeah. But we've worked with the man.
Yeah.
We know the man.
Yeah.
What is your take on this sort of battle of...
I can't answer it within about 2 minutes. I think there's... so I think, if I was going to sum it up, I think that UKIP, towards the end, when Nigel Farage was leader, was a bit of a basket case, right? He had his fingers burnt because you couldn't get anything done, you couldn't do what you wanted with the party, right? Yeah. And that's a symptom of having, if you like, a bit of a renegade disruptor party that attracts a certain kind of supporter who actually, they don't like being told what to do, right? Which is absolutely fine. So I think he's in a mindset, and I don't know what it was like with the Brexit Party. You've probably got...
different world, weirdly, the Brexit Party. There was sort of the UKIP era, and you're absolutely right on that analysis, because that was when I was sort of deeply involved, and you did end up with factions within the NEC who became anti-Nigel, and he really did have his fingers burnt. Yeah. Now, the Brexit Party era really did professionalise and was delegating lots and lots and lots to all these other people. Yeah. Now, I think what's happened with Reform UK is some of the old guard from the UKIP era have come back in, and they're the ones saying to Nigel, watch that person, don't trust him. Oh, you'd never guess what this person's doing. Oh, yeah, I think there's some naughtiness going on.
Well, you might be right, and you've got a greater insight than I have. But I think ultimately, it's about ensuring that you have control, because this is a massive opportunity for reform to really shake up the political landscape in this country. And what you can't afford is to have renegade politicians within your ranks going off piste, if you like. So you've got to deal with them, haven't you?
And there's also, we'll talk about this after the break, because I can hear the music fading up, meaning we've got to go to the top of the hour, hard out, as we say in the industry. But I think as well, there's a big internal debate about where the Overton window's at, and there are people who've got their passionate ideology of we've got to be the vanguard, and then there's the political pragmatism of we've got to win an election. And I think those two sort of people who don't get politics don't understand the strategy. Right, we're going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere, because Duncan and I are back to give you more news and views after this. See you in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the programme. It's Alex Phillips here with you until 10 o'clock today. I mean, that's a big old stint, isn't it? I didn't realise I was signing up for 4 full hours. No, I did, don't you worry about that. I'm joined by Duncan Barks, who's at least going to hold my hand through the next hour.
Yeah.
And then I'm out there by myself.
You're going to take the stabilisers off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully when the caffeine kicks in, I'll be able to function. I'm just going to read some of your messages, actually, because this is Kenny from Edinburgh. Hi, Alex. I went to the Highlands for a wee holiday last summer, and me and my brother went to Loch Ness. Ian went swimming in the loch, but I did not, in capital letters, just in case Nessie was actually there. My brother is still laughing at me because of it, but jumping in a body of water where there could be a blimmin' dinosaur, I think he's the mad one. Would you swim in Loch Ness?
Would I?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite happily.
Yeah.
I did a trip.
Not worried about that dino?
No. I think Nessie's quite friendly.
I think Nessie's probably... What does Nessie eat, though?
Big Mac and fries.
It's like the time when Gaza went to find Raoul Moat with some chicken. There's some sort of crazy man every night who's throwing takeaways into the loch.
Yeah, it'll be me in 20 years' time.
Oh, yeah. No, you'll be retired up in Scotland when you've had enough of all the migration down here. Oh, blimey, we're going off on mad tangents. Listen, our question today, by the way, we're discussing in the first hour of the show. It turns out that in one neighbourhood in Leicestershire, 43% of people who live there don't speak any English. And so we've been discussing, do you actually need to speak English to live in England? I think we've both concluded, no, you don't, and that's a problem.
You don't, and I don't think there's an incentive to do so. But I do think it's a generational shift. I think there would have been a time where people would have made an effort to go, when they're in a different country, to learn a bit of the language, and I don't think that's there anymore. I think the attitudes have changed, and I think that goes hand in hand with a slightly more selfish attitude of younger generations who can well, why should I?
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I think as well, modern technology means that you can get away with not speaking a language and you don't feel alienated or isolated. You know, you can move to Britain, and if you're from, like, say, Sudan, and your next door neighbour's from Sudan, and your mate Jamal's from Sudan, and you can message him, and you can watch Sudanese TV, and you can speak to your friends back home in Sudan, then fine, you don't need to integrate. Whereas if you roll the clock back 40 years and you came from Sudan and you don't speak English, the only way to communicate with people back home is sending a letter, and 2 months later you might get the reply. And so I think that's also enabled people to essentially sort of live in isolated microcosms of their own design.
Yeah, and roll into that. And again, this brings us back to human nature and psychology a little bit. You end up, when people come to this country, let's say you're a guy who's come from, I don't know, Sudan, you're more likely to settle somewhere in a city where there are other Sudanese people, right? So you then create that community. So again, there's not that need, when you also add to it the technology point that you've made, there's not that need to have to integrate or to learn the language of that country. And
people actually don't just sort of not bother integrating or not bother learning the language. They actually bring all the politics and the beef and the, all the sort of bad stuff. So you've got in parts of Leicester running street battles between Hindus and Muslims. You've also got parts of the country where when people go and campaign to be on the local Labour Council, they're wearing the rosette of the political party back at home in Pakistan.
Yeah, you've got that.
I like Imran Khan, vote for me to be on Oldham Council or something like that.
And also, we have to get into the very challenging and difficult conversation at times, which is the clash of cultures, because what you can see happening is predominantly young men coming from other countries where the views on women are pretty low, the rights of women are pretty low, and they come to this country and they think it's all right to leer at a 13-year-old walking down the street. Yeah. Well, we don't think that's acceptable. No woman should have to, or young girl should have to be subjected to that. And so that's when the clash of cultures happens, and that happens because there is no integration.
Now, you're talking about sort of acceptable conversation, and I want to bring you back to what we were talking about before the break, which is what's gone on in reform and this divide. And I think it's one of these things that's sort of happening within a certain bubble and on X, and out in the wider world, it's not really playing out. But people sort of, obsessed on X and all their little tribal communities think it is.
Yeah.
But there's been this debate that, reform's gone too soft, that Rupert Lowe had it right. He was being the brave one and doing all this great stuff, where Nigel was being overly cautious, and he's become like the uniparty. So I want to talk to you about that, because part of this is down to the shift of the Overton window, but I think a lot of this is tethered to, say, X, and people living on X thinking, great, this is a free speech platform, and these are the conversations we're having here. But then politically out there in the constituencies, it's a different kettle of fish. And I think Nigel's got a plan that he wants to be in number 10. He realises that the zeitgeist is on his side for once, and he doesn't want to mess it up. And the idea of going gung-ho, and again, we spoke earlier about his fingers being burnt in the UKIP days by staff battles and factional warfare.
Absolute basket case.
Yeah, but also his fingers were burnt in those days of him just saying, 80% of cash machine fraud is committed by, Romanians and Bulgarians. You racist! You can't say that. But then now people can say that, and he's like, OK, I think he's a bit more tentative when it comes to leading the way and driving the debate, being the first one, being the vanguard. And tactically, perhaps that is the right approach. I don't know.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I read a piece for the Daily Express at the beginning of the week about this so-called reform civil war, and I made the point, not for any other reason apart from the fact that the facts speak for themselves. Nigel Farage, love him or loathe him, is one of the most successful politicians of recent decades, right? And a successful campaigner. He gave UKIP its first MPs. He took the Brexit party to win the European elections. And against a really tough voting system we have in this country, first past the post, last July, took reform to 5 MPs. All of that is a tremendous amount of achievements. There's no other way you can look at it. Those facts speak for themselves, right? So I think that needs to be said, and that needs to be on the record. It's about how you build on what you've already achieved, which has been, as I say, remarkable given our voting system. There are 5 MPs from a small party against first past the post that really does penalise smaller parties. Where do you go from here? Well, you have a Labour government who in its first several months have been absolutely dreadful in all kinds of ways. And, I'll make this point now here on Talk. We haven't even seen what's happening to business properly yet. Wait until after April and all of this stuff kicks in from the budget. You're going to see pubs closing. You're going to see more people unemployed. You then get into the whole area of this Labour government. There's two-tier justice. We've seen all of that. There are people who thought, I knew it was going to be bad. I didn't realise it was going to be this bad. You've got the Conservative Party, 14 years of governing, first few years of that in coalition with the Lib Dems. I'd like to see the Conservatives do better, but they're going to have to serve their penance, actually, because it's too easy for them to say, we should be doing this now. And people like you and I on the TV or the radio going, well, why didn't you do it 2 years ago? Right?
I don't buy into this whole idea that Kemi Badenoch keeps putting out there, which is the Conservatives are under new management. It's going to be different under me. It's like, no, you're from exactly the same cohort that's been running the Conservatives for the past 5-10 years.
So against all of that backdrop, you have an opportunity for reform to really shake and shape things in a slightly different way. Shake things up and shape things in a different way. How do they do it? Well, it's interesting because on some of the opinion polls at the moment, they are in the top spot. Some of the others, they're just a little bit behind Labour, but only by 1 or 2 percentage points. Now, there is this view in politics in the past that you win elections by dominating the centre ground because you have floating voters who aren't entirely sure who they're going to vote for, what they believe. So you need a good wodge of those to get you a decent enough majority to form a government. And this puts, I think, Nigel Farage and Reform in an interesting position because the current support that the party has comes from, in the past, being quite tough on immigration, talking about the small boats and saying we don't think this is good enough, this needs to stop. And a lot of people going, where does the next chunk of vote come from?
Right.
And if that next chunk of vote comes from the middle ground, does that mean you need to be a little bit more wary talking about immigration in a certain way because it might turn off the floating voter? And I don't know the answer to that, but my PS to this would be, if you look at all of the stuff that comes out in terms of research regarding issues that matter to people, example, immigration now is either number 1 or number 2.
Yeah. So I think you're onto something here, and I think one of the reasons why reform are so popular is because they're synonymous with being tough on immigration. And actually, if you look at the success of Donald Trump in America, if you look at the success of Giorgia Meloni in Italy, if you look at the climb of the AfD in Giorgia Meloni in Italy, the AfD in Germany, Rassemblement in France, and I think there are sort of, there's skullduggery going on that's prevented those parties being even more successful, as we know. You've got sort of the way of reducing plebiscites and banning people from running and things like this. But if you look at the pattern that's sweeping across the West, the Overton window has blimmin' shifted. It has moved. And I don't think caution. I think there's got to be a sort of limit to how far you go and what you say, because you can't scare people off. And also you can't promise things that are just impractical. And this is one of the big sort of splits where people say, I'm going to deport millions of people as soon as we get into power. And it's like, but you won't be able to.
Logistically, I don't see how you can do that.
And so I think actually it's quite nice for Nigel bringing candour back into politics. But I do think if he's being told, rein back the immigration talk, is bad advice, because that's got him to where he is. That is why the polling is still so high, because I don't think the average voter in Stockport has noticed he's reined it back in. They just think immigration's the issue and he's the one we trust with this. So I think that there's a sort of halfway point. Don't be too cautious, but don't be too gung-ho.
And let's go back to the point that you made earlier rather brilliantly. This spat, if you like, which has become a public spat because the newspapers have been reporting it, and therefore people like you and I talk about it on the radio and the TV. This spat between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage has predominantly, initially was played out on social media, on as we know, Twitter, and now X. I interviewed Rupert Lowe a few weeks ago. Back in November, actually, I think it was, for a podcast that I'm involved in for the Taxpayers Alliance. It's called A Nation of Taxpayers. Really interesting bloke, right? Interesting bloke, self-made man, former chair of Southampton Football Club. Absolutely fantastic. Very impressive in Parliament as well, in the chamber. He's using the parliamentary system to ask questions you just know the government don't want to be asked, or they don't have the answers for. However, outside of X, Twitter, outside of the Westminster bubble, people don't know who Rupert Lowe is.
There was polling I was sent by, I think, Jail Partners, which basically had done polling of voters and polling of reform voters at large. 80% of voters have never heard of Rupert Lowe. When you then ask reform voters, have you heard of Rupert Lowe? 75% haven't. Which actually just goes to show that it is a brand that's synonymous with being tough on immigration and Nigel Farage and all of this other maelstrom, frankly, doesn't matter.
But here's the challenge, Alex. For reform to continue to grow and bust through the 30% mark in some of the pollings, it has to become bigger than Nigel. Doesn't mean he has to stop being leader. It just means you need more people spreading the reform word, surely, in order to get some of those people from the centre ground.
And this is what's so sad, because Rupert was, a brilliant figure to have in the party, credible, intelligent, articulate, powerful, brave. It was, and having this sort of quality on your front bench, it was, wow, this is really, quite the biz. And so it's a shame to have lost that. And so that is something that also now needs to be addressed. They've got a very good chance of winning the Runcorn by-election, according to all polling. They now need to start, whenever there's a by-election opportunity, whenever they've got to start padding out. But Nigel's also got to make sure that he has team players, because all politicians need team players. And I think the biggest lesson to learn is, guess what? David Cameron and George Osborne loathed each other. But they didn't fight on X. We didn't know that. They looked like the cosiest couple in politics. So this is the big lesson to learn. Put your toys down, put the egos in the dustbin, and actually, when it comes to a marriage, think about the kids. And in this circumstance, the kids is us, the nation.
That's a brilliant analogy, and I think you're right about, look, you and I have worked in politics for decades, right? Every politician has an ego, right? It's impossible to find a politician with no ego. It's also virtually impossible to find a politician who doesn't think they can do a better job than their boss or their party leader.
Right, exactly.
Okay? Reform is in a position as a relatively young party, but a remarkably successful party so far for its youth, to really go big guns. But stuff like this will get in the way. People do not vote for divided parties.
No.
And when it is making the front page of newspapers like the Daily Telegraph this morning, it is starting to, I mean, you know, I saw someone again on social media, usual caveat is not representative of normal life, making the kind of point which is, well, you know, this doesn't really matter because it's just a Westminster thing. And I said that a few moments ago. However, when it starts being on the front page of a national newspaper that you can pick up on your BP going home, right, and you read that story, that stops being something that's a bit of a Westminster bubble thing and starts to become more mainstream. And this person on social media was going, well, look, the polls are still good for reform. And I found myself going, yeah, at the moment. Let's see where we are in 2 weeks, because this stuff does take a bit of time to filter out, and it's not helped by the fact that you have a load of reform people all over social media wading into this.
Oh, I know. It's like, if you like reform, just leave it alone. Just, you know, don't sort of pour fuel onto the fire. That would be my advice. Right, we've got a lot more stories to get through. We like going on a deep dive, don't we?
That was a deep dive.
But we'll take a little break, and then we'll sort of recalibrate after the break and bring you more news that's out there this weekend. See you in just a moment.
You're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Let's do some messages, some interactions, some phone chit-chats. Alan in Merseyside says people who live here and don't speak English should leave. We're just stirring up trouble for the future. Denise said, hi Alex, we recently had our loft insulated. They sent workers who could hardly speak English. To be able to explain what we wanted, they called their office, who served as translators. That was a very hard experience. And I would just say, get out. I don't want workers in my house. I have to say, so I rent my property, and there was a roof my roof needed to be repaired, and so the landlady, who is also foreign, had got, you know, her team of favourite builders to come and repair my roof. And the main guy who sort of came and sort of said, oh, you know, we're going to be at 9 o'clock tomorrow, he spoke English. When the team turned up without the main guy, none of them spoke English, right? And I'm a woman who lives by herself, and so they sort of, and I felt uncomfortable about, because they need to get through to the back garden. I felt uncomfortable about these men being in my home.
How many were there?
There were 2.
Right.
And I said to my other half, I said, Nicholas, you know, I've got to go to work, and I don't want to seem like some sort of racist, but I don't want to just leave randos in my house. Can you stay here? And also they're a bit like a bit gnarly. And I said, this is going to sound kind of precious, but I don't really want them using the loo. You know, can you sort of, if they ask to use the bathroom, can you ask them to go use the toilet?
You just don't know what they're going to do when you're not there. I mean,
what's worse is apparently, so I'd sort of left Nicholas, and these guys sort of arrived. I was just leaving the house. One guy literally didn't speak English. Went toilet, toilet, toilet. Went straight upstairs to the bathroom. Was in there for half an hour. Came out and then said in broken English, coffee, bad stomach.
Oh, nice.
So there you go.
Right.
I'm like, great. Like this is my house that I pay a ridiculous amount of rent for.
Yeah.
I've got no control over who comes to repairs the roof, or you know, has a half-hour explosion in my bathroom.
I bet you used a lot of bleach when you got home.
I know, my lovely boyfriend did all of that. He sort of cleaned it immaculately. Yeah. But it's just like, if someone came to my house, like you get people now in London all the time turning from the doorstep to read your gas meter, and they just go, I need to come read you, and it's like, who are you? Go away. Yeah, I don't. No,
and it doesn't help. It comes back to the language stuff, doesn't it? I mean, if you're employed to do a job by a company, fixing a roof or anything else, I don't think it's too much of an expectation to expect that person who's turning up at your house or your flat to have a basic grasp of the English language.
Yeah. It brings trust with it. Let's have a voice note now. This is Christine.
Hi Alex, it's Christine. I actually live in France, and regarding the migration issues of language and everything else, it's as if the English have a national guilt of being the sort of empire that it once was, and having to repay all these nations that we took advantage of during in our history. It's not right. I don't think it's right. And by the way, I do speak French. Bye.
And actually, Christine has an interesting point there. Now, Christine speaks French, but a lot of English people, maybe they also have a guilt because they don't speak. We're rubbish at learning other languages in this country. We're the absolute back of the class when it comes to having a second tongue.
It's true, but again, see, so when I was a kid, my dad used to work for Shell Oil. And he was a merchant Navy seaman, and he was chief officer, which was good because you could take your family with you on certain trips. So me, my mum and my dad, when I was the age between about 2 and 4, you know, I spent my time bobbing around on a big tanker in various parts of the world. He then went to run an oil refinery in the West Indies, training local guys to run the oil refinery, and he made it his ambition to learn enough of the local language in order to communicate effectively with these guys, because he saw that as being the right thing to do. And I know I keep banging on about this, and I know I'm going to sound like an old git, but it is a generational thing. Yeah. Where there is a generation, my parents' generation, and I like to think my generation, where if you go to another country on holiday or to live there permanently or whatever, you make the blooming effort to learn a bit of the language.
But it's also a generational thing when it comes to our immigrant communities, because when we had the sort of Windrush generation, let's say, people came from Pakistan, Jamaica, Kenya, whatever, they all turned up, hung a picture of the blimmin' Queen on the wall,
exactly that,
wanted to, you know, make tea and biscuits and sandwiches, and got involved in the local community and were blimmin' proud of it. And then what we assumed was the children of these people would be even more integrated, and their children would be even more integrated. But the reverse has happened. So what's happened?
What's caused that? You're absolutely right. It's a brilliant example, not just Windrush, but, you know, after the war, London transport recruited heavily from various countries around the world, and people came here and they wanted to have a new life in this country, and you're absolutely right, they did whatever possible to integrate, and the picture of the Queen hanging on the wall is absolutely bang on the money. That was great, and that's how it should be, and that's how we should all be, I think, if we go and live in another country. But you're right, that generation had children, they had children, and we now have people who seem to not particularly like this country, right? What's changed?
Now, you tell me.
I don't know. I'm asking you the question. I don't know.
I think it's probably a bit like Hooke's law of elasticity. You never thought I was going to bring that up, did you? At 7:27 in the morning on a Saturday.
I don't even know what it is. What is it?
Right, so Hooke's law of elasticity, and someone's going to message in and correct me here because they'll be like, your physics is kaput. But basically, it's something on the lines of you can stretch an elastic band so far, and it'll ping back to the same shape. But then when you go past a certain point, and you kind of break the elasticity, it's forever sort of a big floppy mess. It never sort of has its integral structure. So I kind of think when it comes to the migration debate, when you've got 50,000 odd people who come over, scattered around communities they integrate, when it's 100,000, well, that they're starting to sort of make little communities within themselves. When it's 1 million, then they can just be a sort of little self-serving blob in the middle. You throw into that this sort of mad critical race theory, which has told everyone that white people are evil and you're the victim. You then throw into that social media, which forces people to not just live in their sort of algorithm-driven silos, but to amplify this need to be part of a tribe. Because all of a sudden you're not just from Coventry or from Warwickshire or from Britain, you're from the whole world.
Yes.
And what do you identify as? Who are your people? What's your clan?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with so-called multiculturalism or immigration. It's like Hooke's law of elasticity. When it's a certain amount, it works. When you push it to it being a nation split 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, you then end up, with sort of, mad civil wars, basically, because humans are tribal animals. They're not made. They're made to trade. They're made to interact. They're not made to sort of all rub along with all these different languages and religions. Shall we speak to Jane, who's in West Yorkshire? Hello there, Jane.
Good morning.
Thank you for your patience.
And
We've had you
morning.
waiting a long time, haven't we? So thank you so much for holding on for us, Jane.
No, I want to say good morning to you and good morning to Duncan, because a lot of people that come on don't always say good morning to the guest.
Oh, that's
morning, Jane. Thank you.
I find that quite rude.
It is.
The reason that I've rung in is because I work with homelessness for a local authority. And the little story that I've got to tell is that I was asked to phone somebody to assess them for homelessness. And the first thing he said when he came on the phone was, I don't speak English. But in his attachments, he'd got a full driver's licence. Well, you've got to do a written test. So he said, can you speak to my friend? So the friend came and I said, before we go any further, can you just explain how he's got a full driver's licence if he doesn't speak English? I said, because I'm going to have to report it to the DVLA. And he snatched the phone off her. He called me every expletive that you can imagine. And I said, well, why have you said that you don't speak English? He said, because if you say you don't speak English, you get a better service.
That's astonishing.
I've got 100 stories. I could take up the rest of your...
Well, Jane, I love a good story. I had a guest on my show yesterday. I think he was called Andrew. But he gave me the most remarkable story I've ever heard. This beggars belief, right?
I think I heard that.
Right, OK, so you remember it. If people weren't tuned in yesterday, it is worth repeating, isn't it, Jane? Because I actually was agog. So he said that a doctor had told him that when it comes to disability benefits, there are people who've gone through cancer treatments and things like that, who have had to have, colostomy bags and so on and so forth. And when you have that, you're entitled to some sort of living allowance. And then after a period of time, it runs out. And there are people who've, had genuine suffering, and then they've come off the disability benefits. But word has got around as part of a life hack for people gaming the system. And he was saying, particularly with migrant communities, that if you have incontinence, you get disability benefits. And people are going into GP surgeries and deliberately soiling themselves, going into the doctor's clinic and deliberately soiling themselves in order to say they've got bladder issues, they can't leave the house, to get the doctor's note to get the benefits. Wow. That's mad. It
is mad. And it does make you wonder how we've ended up in a climate like that. Well, let's work back on that for a second. I mean, that is a fascinating story to hear. That people know the system so well that they just go, well, actually, what I'm going to do is wean myself or do something else because that way I get a few extra quid a week. How have we ended up in that situation?
So you're like that, and where is the dignity in going into a doctor's office and sort of, building up your supplies and letting it all out in order to then live for free off the country you're in? It's vile. It
is vile, and it comes back to again what I've been saying this morning, which is we have been far too tolerant and too fair, and it's coming back to bite us on the backside. And I also think, just going back on the point that you made earlier about this lack of integration of future generations, etc. I do think, as well as accepting that, under the Blair Brown government, any criticism or even raising any concern of people who come to this country to live was branded as automatically racist and you're a terrible person. We do have an education system that fundamentally has made it quite clear to generations coming through that, oh, well, we shouldn't be too proud of our past because we did this and we did that. And you roll that into it as well. You have this idea which is, this country isn't everything. This country isn't that great. I don't think I like living here. I'll take the money, but actually, what a really unpleasant group of people you are.
It's almost as if it's designed by someone who's decided, you know what, the West has been in control for way too long and it's time to change the balance.
Alex, can I say one last thing before I go? Because I know that they'll cut me off in a minute. But
no, they won't. No, that I decide. I decide when we go to break, Jane, so you carry on.
So the other thing that I get a lot of people that have got a positive decision, and one guy said to me the other week, you surely can't expect me to apply for rent and have to buy my own food.
What?
And I wanted to say really wrongly, which I didn't. I held my tongue. Welcome to the UK.
So this guy, where was this guy from who said, why should I pay rent and buy food?
Because he'd been in a hotel.
He's a migrant?
Yeah.
I want to ask you something, Jane. Dealing with homelessness, how many people who come and say they're homeless are born here?
Right, so what I'm going to say is, Jane's not my proper name, by the way.
That's all right, you don't have to tell us that. We'll call you Jane. Jane Doe is fine by us.
My very good colleague that I worked with for 20 years has said, I feel like we're in a refugee service, not a homeless service anymore. He said every other person is demanding an interpreter. I don't accept that. I just think if you've been here for 10 years, you do know how to speak English.
But also, I'm sorry, it's not our job to give you a blimmin' house. You got relatives back from whence you came. I mean, it's not our job to accept everybody from around the world and give them a house. That's mad. And especially during COVID, I remember, but because of public health, all of a sudden our own people who were homeless, our veterans and people like that, and yes, people with drug issues and people who have really sort of, fallen off the wagon and need specialist care, they were all suddenly put in hotels because we were worried about COVID spreading. Then they're told, get out, sleep in a bus shelter again.
Absolutely.
And the migrants are given the hotels. I mean, what is that about?
It infuriates me, but because I've done it for 20 years, and there used to be hostels, there used to be places that you could refer to. They've all gone. But I'm going to end. I always think you should end on a light note, so I'm going to tell you. I went to my local Tesco's, and this guy just went, Jill, is that you? Sorry, I've just given away my name, but anyway.
Jane, is that you?
Jane, is that you? And I went, oh, my goodness. And he said, thanks to you, I've turned my life around. He said, I've got 2 jobs. I've got a house. I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going back into prison because I worked in the prisons. I worked at Armley. And he just said, you were just always, you never judged me.
Yeah.
And I thought, my goodness, what a lovely, I could be quite a bit choked up now, but it just made me think my job is worth something.
And it's important that we have Janes in this world to look after our own, because a civilised society does that. It looks after people who might have messed up. but they might have come from extremely complex backgrounds, that we provide rehabilitation. So when people might have been in prison, they can't stay in there forever. They come out and they become productive members of society. And a civilised society does that. The problem is we're starting to fail doing that because we're just importing the problems from other countries. And that I find worrying.
I think that's a fair comment. I mean, I think that the biggest deterrent we had on the blocks that never really got up and running as a result of the election and the new government was the Rwanda policy. I'm absolutely convinced if you have a deterrent in place, which is you come to this country illegally, so we're talking about illegal immigration, you know, you get on a boat, you come over the channel and you rock up in Dover or whatever, you come here illegally and you chuck your passport in the water so we don't know who you are, and your mobile phones and everything goes in the water, right? If you come into this country illegally, you get taken to somewhere like Rwanda and you get processed. And I genuinely believe the absence of a deterrent like that, and I accept some people might go over the detail and say, well, there's a flaw with this, a flaw with that. We'll just see what Jane has outlined in terms of people that she's having to deal with who go, well, I have to pay for my own rent and my own food when I'm in your country. It's only going to get worse because there is no decent deterrent.
Right, on that note, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere because we're still going to have a little bit more Duncan barks before he sets sail onto pastures new. So don't go anywhere. We're back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Right, Duncan, before I let you go, what is your final story that you're going to serve up to us on a silver platter?
Well, it's Birmingham. I'm not going to serve you up Birmingham on the silver platter, because, but it'd be fascinating to find out if there's any Talk listeners and viewers who've experienced what's going on in Brum. Have you been to Birmingham recently?
Not recently, no, not for a long time.
So we know that the council in Birmingham has been through the mill recently. It's bankrupt, effectively. Labour Council, all kinds of reasons.
Labour councils.
Yeah, funny that, as to why it's on the bones of its backside financially. But they've got strike action taking place currently with the people who collect the bins, Birmingham's bin workers, over 2 months of strike action. And what people are now reporting are a couple of things. Bags of rubbish standing 6 feet high on street corners, but also what happens when you have a lot of rubbish and detritus everywhere. You get a lot of rats.
Oh, I've seen this headline, rats the size of cats.
Rats the size of cats.
Rats the size of cats.
And this is the result of industrial action. And invariably what we're now seeing is we're seeing some political commentators. Now, I have very distant memories of this because I am old, but not that old, of the winter of discontent in 1978, where and you know, if you're a Zoomer listening, Google it, because you know, back towards that 78, 79 time in this country's history, you had a lot of industrial action. You had 3-day week and stuff. You had bins not being emptied. You had bodies not being buried. It was a pretty grim time in this country, and many people believe that's actually one of the reasons why Margaret Thatcher came along in 79, got elected, because she promised change for the country. And they're drawing parallels now with what we saw in 1978. So you've got this situation where you've just got shed loads of bin liners everywhere, all over Birmingham, a rat problem. You've got a guy here who's told one of the newspapers it's like living in a prison, but instead of bars, we've got bin bags. There's been nothing like it since 78. You've got a parent here and a grandparent who said that they're scared to let their kids go out because of the rats. So I just think it's a really sad situation in Birmingham at the moment, where you have just shy of 400 bin workers who began their latest bout of industrial action, describing it as an indefinite all-out strike.
I mean, what I'm finding is the decline, the economic decline, is palpable now in the UK. It is palpable. I mean, I think back to the city where I'm from, Gloucester, which when I was growing up as a kid, yes, it was never the world's most affluent city, but it was nice. It was pleasant. The town centre was somewhere that I'd go with my friends and hang out, and there were little shops and this. And now it's sort of all boarded up, or the sort of, you know, the sort of shops that sell stuff that has fallen off the back of a lorry, 1,000 vape shops and Turkish barbers, and it just doesn't feel nice anymore. No. And this is, when you look around the UK, and especially, there's something really heart-wrenching about looking back at archive video footage of somewhere. So my other half's from Ealing. Right. And he grew up in Ealing. He said, oh, you know, his grandma used to walk to the shops to get the local paper and the pint of milk. And, you know, everyone knew their neighbours, and going around, you know, playing in back gardens and going out on bike rides. And now when you go to Ealing, you don't even see a you know, British face anymore.
There has been a massive shift, and I think, you know, older people, and I class myself as one of these now, and in what was laughingly called middle age, you know, we have a bit of a life experience, and I do look back to 20, 30 years ago, and I think this country has changed significantly. I'm interested in the point you made about vape shops and Turkish barbers. Right. I mean, so I mentioned this earlier, I often do when I'm on talk, and there are some talk listeners in Chichester, because one bumped into me in the pub about 3 weeks ago, and I do like that talk show on a Saturday morning, so hello to you.
Hello.
And Chichester, you know, it's classed as a city because we had a cathedral, but it's always been, it's kind of been seen as a genteel part of West Sussex, relatively genteel. And the amount of vape shops that have opened up, and here's the thing, Alex, and I don't know what your take is on this. I know people who vape, but you don't need 4 vape shops.
We know what they are. So it's a bit like when you look in London, you've got all the souvenir shops that have no one in. No one's buying your key rings and your crap. You know, there's no one in there. They're always staffed by people who you can tell are not born and bred here, because you hear the accent, you look at the face, and you're like, well, you know, you didn't go to school in Ealing, did you? Well, I don't actually, but you know, you can tell that, and it's the vape shops, it's the Turkish barbers, it's the souvenir shops, it's the American candy stores. They're all fronts. So now, Lovely Devices in Wiltshire seems to have a load of Turkish barbers, and you think, right, so all the local farmers are needing their beards trimmed, are they, all of a sudden?
So what are you alleging? Money laundering?
Yeah, I think most of them are fronts for criminal enterprise. It's just true. And a lot of that criminal enterprise, I wouldn't be surprised, would probably be connected to trafficking gangs.
Now, look, you know, you work as a journalist. You've picked up on this. I know countless journalists who've also got their suspicions as well. But these shops just carry on being opened up unchallenged. So what's going on?
Well, did you hear, actually, in the news, I don't think I've got it in my sort of like a, you know, huge batch of papers here, but there was a particular, so there's basically skilled workers are being imported to go work in kebab shops.
Right.
a special skilled visa. And there was one kebab shop somewhere in the country that had issued about 14 of these visas to get skilled workers in to work at the kebab shop.
Well, listen, I do enjoy a kebab. What's the skill you need to work in a kebab shop?
Exactly.
I mean, you could, yeah.
I mean, what is so ridiculous is so much the criminality now is so brazen. You know, you walk down the street and you see all of these Vietnamese nail bars, and you know full well that they are being operated by the same gangs who are planting the cannabis factories.
All cash in hand.
Yeah. Same with the hand car wash.
Yes.
You know, these people have probably been trafficked by gangs.
And there's evidence that that is the case, because occasionally you get the Home Office or the Border Force, whatever they're calling themselves this week, where they go and bust one of these operations, and it turns out that you've got 5 or 6 blokes, and they're always blokes, who've been working at these hand car wash places who shouldn't be in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they operate brazenly, they can operate with impunity, and I don't understand what's happened. Can it just be cuts, oh, cuts to the Border Force, cuts to the police, the backlog in the judicial system? The fact of the matter is, if we were just a lot more stringent about who gets into this country, half of this stuff just wouldn't have taken root in the first place.
I think you're right.
It's easy.
And you roll into the point that's been reoccurring on this show this morning, which is we've been very tolerant, some might say too tolerant, very fair, some might say too fair, and it's a perfect storm, isn't it? We've ended up with what we've got now.
Yeah.
And we have a changing society, a society that a lot of people don't recognise, a society where you have people who have come to live in this country for whatever reason, who don't accept the laws of this country, who want to behave in a certain way. And we have an education system, we have a judicial system, and elements of the civil service where people just go, no, it's all right, it's okay. No, you carry on doing what you're doing. Because we've been scared to say, no, you can't do that here.
But even the popular line that was parroted by politicians for so long when they said, well, we need immigration, it increases our GDP, even that's proven to be wrong now. You look at countries that have, delved into this, like Germany, and they go, right, migration's actually costing us.
Well, I think that's the Achilles heel of Boris Johnson. Occasionally what you see and hear is people just going, oh, the fortunes of the Conservative Party could be turned around if we bring back good old Boris, right? Well, under his watch, immigration went through the roof. They call it the Boris wave, don't they? So that's always going to be an attack line, particularly by parties like Reform, and rightly so. It's just like, well, you were the Prime Minister who allowed this amount of people to come to this country.
Yeah.
And I take a relatively pragmatic view personally on immigration. I think we do need some people from other countries to come and work in this country, because we don't have the workforce, with birth rates are down, etc. But we've not been clever about it. We've not been nuanced about it. Over the last 10 to 20 years, it's been a case of like, everyone can come in.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a skill set, I mean, in areas like hospitality, where, I mean, I did some time working down in Devon, and local people didn't want to do the jobs in some of the hospitality sectors. So you would use, there would be people from all kinds of countries around the world who would fill the barista jobs and stuff, and that is all fine. The people in the agricultural sector, I used to talk to a turkey farmer.
But at the same time, I kind of think my mum used to pick fruit. She's from Evesham, and I think actually we need to get strict on this and being like, British people can do these jobs, and if you're sitting there job seeking, be prepared, you're going to have to do what's available.
I agree.
Duncan, it's been lovely having you here. I've got to say goodbye now, because we've got to squeeze some sport in for the top of the hour, but how wonderful to be reunited.
Lovely to see you
Duncan
again,
Box, ladies and gentlemen.
Alex Phillips.
Right, going to take a short break. Back after this.
you're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is Sports O'Clock, because I'm joined by Will Hobbs, a genius Talk Sports reporter who knows everything about sport.
We'll find out. Could get exposed. Who knows?
Right, now, because this is my show, I've decided that we're a sports-free zone other than the two real sports, which is rugby and Formula One, and we're being blessed by both this weekend.
Absolutely. Super Saturday, Judgment Day, whatever you want to call it in the Six Nations. So we start at 2:15, Ireland versus Italy, and it's very exciting. Because Ireland lost last week, the title is very much up for grabs. So Ireland, England and France have all lost one game, which means if Ireland beat Italy, they go top of the table.
Which they will.
That's at 2:15. They'll be on 19 points if they get the bonus point, which people expect. Then it's England-Wales. England
we will
are
easily beat
expected
them.
to win. Well,
I mean, Wales have gone.
It is in Cardiff. They are slightly resurgent.
Oh, but
75,000 screaming Welsh people.
I've been
always
in there,
intimidating. So England-Wales, if England do what you say, Alex, and get the bonus point win, they go above Ireland, 20 points.
Right.
And then it's France-Scotland. If France win...
Which they probably will, but not as easy to call.
The title is theirs.
The title is theirs.
So England and Ireland hoping that Scotland can do them a favour and beat Ireland and beat France in Paris and leave the title open.
So I've just basically got a whole afternoon on my sofa watching the rugby, which is brilliant. I cannot wait. And, of course, catching up on what's been going on in the Formula One, because the season has kicked off this weekend. It's back!
Has indeed. It's in Melbourne, and Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. A mixed start in qualifying. He's 8th on the grid for tomorrow's Grand Prix. And it's the McLarens who are leading the way. Lando Norris, last season's runners-up, who I believe, Alex, is your tip for this season.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny, at the end of last season, when the McLaren sort of really came back strong after the sort of mid-season break, it suddenly made Formula One interesting again, because it'd been monopolised by Red Bull and Max Verstappen. You go through these phases in Formula One where a team and a driver sort of bed in, win all the points.
Like Sebastian Vettel
Like
did,
Sebastian Vettel, who used to be my guy, but everyone got sick of him other than me. But it does make the sport a bit boring. And then you suddenly found McLaren were doing well again, and it's our young driver, it's our young Lando.
Absolutely.
And it's so great to see this sort of British promise. And he's a fun person, you know, he's very likeable in the sport. And so before the season started, it was like, OK, so what would be fun? Well, because next season's where it's going to be the big shake-up, regulation changes, and we're going to suddenly have a completely mixed-up grid, I'd imagine, at least for the first few races. So what do we hope for in 2025? Well, someone to take the challenge to Red Bull. And it seems to me from qualifying, my wishes have been delivered.
Indeed, Oscar Piastri, the home favourite, he's also on pole, and George Russell in 4th, the other UK driver, just behind Max Verstappen. A quick word on the football, just so you know what you can be looking out for on TalkSport. Manchester City versus Chelsea on TalkSport 2. That's the League Cup final in the women's game. Interesting there. John Cushing, who was at Manchester City, he left as manager, then they sacked their manager the week of the final, and then he's come back to manage the cup final, which is a last-minute interesting appointment. Then you got in the men's game, Man City are playing Brighton in a big showdown for the top 4, and the first game on TalkSport at 12:30, Leeds versus QPR. Can Leeds go 5 points clear at the top of the championship? Find out with live commentary.
Well, there you go. And I don't know the answer to any of that because I don't even know what football is. And that's because I'm from Gloucester and our balls are egg-shaped.
Indeed.
It's been fantastic having you in the studio. Thank you for that sports roundup, Will. Are you an F1 fan?
Yeah, I like my F1.
And who's your guy? this season.
I'd love a Hamilton push in the Ferrari.
Really? Yeah, Hamilton Ferrari. It would be iconic.
He's tied on 7 with Schumacher, isn't he?
Yeah, that's true. It would, and he's been an incredible ambassador for the sport. Will, thank you so much. You've got to run off and do your bulletin now, but great. Well, next time I cover breakfast, I'll welcome you with open arms.
Thanks very much.
Right, so there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of sport for you to look forward to today. Are you going to be watching it like I will be watching it? Certainly I'll be watching the rugby. I wish rugby was sort of around a bit more. I don't know how you feel about this, but coming from Gloucester, I was born and brought up with it. It's a proper sport. Now, our big question of the day has been whether or not you need to speak English if you live in this country. It's not ought, it's whether you need to, right? A lot of people messaging in telling me stories of where they had builders in and no one spoke a word of English and they had to phone up the head office and say, oh, you know, what's this person demanding of me? It seems crazy to me when we are the lingua francum of the world that people come here and after living here for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, they're still not speaking our language, and we, the taxpayer, are forking out oodles of cash to provide translators in our doctor's surgeries, translators in our legal systems. Now, sometimes when you're getting official documentation from the local council, it's in a gazillion different languages. It's like sort of opening up the sort of Dead Sea Scrolls, a papyrus of all the options, the Rosetta Stone of council tax. Why are we paying for this? Because if you go to France, if you go to Spain, guess what? If you don't speak the language, you don't get a translator. You're on your own. I know this because I spent a period of time living in Lanzarote and did in my knee. I don't speak Spanish. And I went to the hospital and I was having to sort of use Google Translate to sort of be able to communicate with the wonderful staff who looked after me, that the NHS paid for, by the way, because I had my global health card. So it's not like I was draining the Spanish government's resources. I wasn't pinching from the pockets of Canarians. Again, why are we so generous in this country? Something has got to change. Something has got to give. If you want to get in touch, the number is 0344499 1000. You can register your interest to speak to me, and later on you'll be patched through to the studio. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you'd prefer to text because you're a bit more old school, the number for SMUZ is 87222. Remember to write the word talk before your message. That way it pings the masts on top of Talk Towers. We're also on X at talkTV. Going to take a short break now, but stay with me for the next 2 hours if you're so inclined. Make yourself a cup of tea, another cup of coffee. Try not to twitch. Pour yourself a bowl of cornflakes, or even better, fry yourself up some eggs and bacon. Go full English, and I'll be here to keep you company for the next 2 hours with more news and more views. That is coming up just after this. I'll see you in a moment.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Alex Phillips here, sitting in for the glorious David Ball, who is having himself some well-earned rest. I'm going to be keeping you company for the next 2 hours. I'm really enjoying doing the breakfast show. It's nice, it's very relaxed, and it's great to have your company. Now, I've inherited a show, and it's a wonderfully put-together thing indeed, and I'm really enjoying what Mr. Bull, Dr. David, does with his 4 hours on air. And so, rather than try to change perfection, we're going to stick with the usual programme, which means now it's time for Transatlantic Talk. Oh, I got to just right, we don't have to sting the producer. Do you know, Mr. Dave comes in and he says to me, now what David does is this, and there's a sting that needs playing, and you say this, and then we press this button, and it will play out the fact that there's going to be Transatlantic Talk, and then David says yeehaw. So I was literally given my choreography, right, during the last advert break, and there I was, a very willing and good pupil, enthusiastically ready to do just that. Honestly, why? What was the point? Oh, we're getting that sting, and then we'll just pretend none of this happened, and I'll pick up where I left off, and it will all look seamless. But in the meantime, if you want to get in touch and talk to us about any of the topics today, please do. But we have especially been discussing, why does it matter if someone in the UK can't speak English? I mean, in this day and age when people from all around the world go and live all over the place, you know, there are people on beaches in Bali working for the NHS, no doubt. They probably don't speak Indonesian. So should people who come here speak Englilich? And not just should, how come they don't have to anymore? That's our big question of the day. The number to call is 03444 991 That costs your standard network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. That way it wends its way into the studio here. We're on X at talkTV. Now, I am told in my invisible earpiece by Mr. Dave that we are now ready for Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
Yeehaw. Because apparently that's what David Ball says. Yeehaw.
I think it would have been fine to get Phil Dave to just do it live, just bring him into the studio, say, listen, you're going to have to just perform it, Phil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you set yourself up to try and do the best job possible. You're the mucker in the studio who looks like a fool when things don't work, but there you go. Never mind. That's why a name and a shame. Isn't that right, Mr. Dave? Anyway, Caroline, it's wonderful to sort of digitally meet you via the auspices of the camera in my studio. Tell me, what have you got for us from the other side of the pond?
Oh boy, well it's cold here, so I'm all snuggled up in my big teddy fleece because it's cold here.
How cold is it?
We're talking. It is. I don't know, but it's the sort of cold that I did not. It's like English weather.
Very
California. I feel like California has one job.
You're in California and you're cold?
Yeah, it's freezing. It's cold.
Get on. I was in DC for inauguration. It was minus 15 degrees. It was like a walk-in freezer.
That's actual cold. That's real cold. But you know, I don't know. Not built for it anymore. Do you know what's weird? I definitely am built for it. It's amazing. You would think I'd be thermally insulated at this point, but no. Right, busy week. Right. Always is.
Yes.
Another busy week on Trump Watch. Here we are. What's been going on? It's just the normal week of Trump. He escalated a trade war, imposed 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium. That's aluminium and not aluminum, as they like to say.
Yeah.
You're talking about people speaking English coming from around the world. Took a shot at the EU, threatened these 200% tariffs on alcohol. And you may have noticed that he turned the front lawn of the White House into something of a car showroom. Of course, Elon Musk, who is busy cutting jobs there in his role with Doge, is also feeling the impact on his personal business, Tesla. And there's this kind of bizarre stunt where Trump got a Tesla on the front lawn of the White House and declared he was going to buy one, and it was fantastic, and sat in it like he'd never sat in a car before.
Do you know, it's fascinating. America under Trump is like, it's every single day there's some sort of madness going on. And the tariff, I remember watching him say, like, you know, there are 4 things I love: community, family, country, tariffs. But what he has done, I mean, he's got every single other world leader, you know, on their toes, hasn't he? They're all reacting essentially to this new presidency. It really is quite astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, reacting, and, you know, people that you would have assumed were, I mean, Canada's sort of reacting to this by saying, hey, hold on a minute, like, we've been allies for a long time. So I think it is a bit of a shake-up in terms of, you know, countries that thought they were solid allies with the US are now finding that perhaps they weren't, and that they are in line for some of this, and these tariffs are on and off again like a bride's nightie.
Like a bride's nightie. I've never heard that one before. That's absolutely brilliant. Right, so I'm also reading here that there's a massive storm crossing the United States at the moment.
Yeah, if I think I'm cold here on the West Coast, it's actually really quite unpleasant and quite dangerous in large parts of the US. One of the worst storms for a long, long time. I know we do talk about these storms, but this is a particularly nasty one with like a ton of tornadoes, 80-mile-an-hour winds, and like right across from like New Orleans, Alabama, and then right across to the East Coast where they're expecting flash flooding as well. So pretty dangerous, pretty unpleasant. Snow. The weird thing is, in parts of it there's snow, and then in parts of it there's wildfires sort of getting fanned with these high winds. So yeah, quite nasty for, you know, trucks getting turned over and that kind of thing.
Does it have a name? Because, I mean, I think we inherited in the UK this sort of naming of weather patterns from America. So is this one being christened with some sort of delightful moniker?
That's a great question. I haven't seen a name on this one. That's not to say that I haven't missed it, but I haven't seen a name on this one. And it's kind of like this big old nasty storm system that's going off quite a big way across. Yeah. I mean,
is it hurricane season, or is this sort of out of season for sort of extreme weather?
So the hurricanes will come up more sort of the kind of what's now called the Gulf of America, kind of up that kind of way, and that generally is more August, September, October time, and that's all where the kind of temperature of the seas and all those kind of things are going on. But honestly, like wildfire season here in on the West Coast, or all these kind of storms, everything's quite topsy-turvy from what the kind of usual order of things in. These storms are more extreme. The season is either longer or kind of out of season, and we're just seeing more and more and more of these kind of extreme weather events.
I mean, what we've seen in the UK is that California's sort of dropped off the news agenda now after those horrific wildfires. How are things going for the rebuilding process? Are people able to go back to their homes yet? I mean, what's the situation like in those areas that were really hard hit by wildfires?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because I think it has dropped off. And no, what happens is we've had rain here where it is a bit chilly, and then those areas become very dangerous with like toxic runoff off of these homes. They've had a lot of mudslides and debris. I mean, serious amounts of debris, like enough. I've seen SUVs shoved across, 100 yards down the road from these kind of debris flows. So it becomes quite a dangerous situation when we have a bit of rain. They're trying to get sections of the Pacific Coast Highway open, but even just clearing out the kind of amount of toxic waste, even just kind of doing that kind of work to just get started is pretty controversial. Where are you going to take it? They want to stick it in like a landfill, so those people don't want it in the landfill. It's very, very complex. But you're right, you have these enormous events, thousands of people displaced, thousands of people not in their homes. And then it drops off the news agenda and everybody says, oh yeah, that happened, didn't it?
And where are they? So a lot of people living in hotels or with relatives. Is it a mixed bag? Has there been sort of emergency accommodation provided?
Yeah, so the Red Cross were on site at the actual time, and there were people in shelters at the time. But it has really pushed up. Rents in LA are ridiculous anyway, and like seriously ridiculous. and so it really has pushed up the demand in the rental market. And yeah, no, they're nowhere near being able to even think about going back and clearing their space. And those people whose homes are in those areas that didn't burn down, you think of them as the lucky ones. The neighbourhoods aren't really safe to be in either. So they're sort of a long way off from being able to return home or being able to start any sort of rebuilding. They did sack the fire chief, though.
Oh, really? Wasn't there a situation where the fire chief and this person, that person, all had the same name?
Maybe, but Karen Bass, who was the LA mayor, was criticised because she was overseas, and then she got into it with the fire boss, who was Kristen Crowley, and about 2 weeks ago she fired Kristen Crowley. Anyway.
I think there were a load of Kristens knocking about. I can't remember. I remember sort of something sticking in my head. Now, tell us about Ted Lasso. I watched Ted Lasso, actually, the first sort of season or so, and then my life got a bit busy and I stopped following it. But it's back, apparently, for yet another season.
Yeah, listen, I just thought we needed a bit of good news. So I thought, let's talk about this, because I always try and put something joyful at the end, and it hasn't always existed. But Ted Lasso is a very joyful show. He is your classic fish out of water story. He's an American running a British soccer club, and he comes with his own sort of brand of optimism and cheeriness and philosophy, and sort of charms them and wins them over. And it looked like that show was going to stop at the end of the second season, but they're actually bringing it back for a third season. No word as to when that'll actually be. But honestly, it's just such a sort of heartwarming, joyful show that it's very nice to have that character back in our lives, I think.
Oh, it is. It is a sort of lovely, it's a lovely mixture as well, a sort of English humour and American humour. And it brings those two elements together so excellently. And it was a huge, huge hit. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. You've actually reminded me, once I finish watching all the sports on this weekend, I might actually catch up with a bit of Ted Lasso. Definitely worth it. Caroline, thank you ever so much.
A pleasure, thank you.
It's been great to meet you for the first time. And stop moaning about the weather, would you? If you knew how cold it was in this studio. We're having one of those interminable winters here.
I'm a softie, sorry.
Yeah, I'm jealous, but I'm sure that it'll be a chilly 18 degrees Celsius. I never know what that is in Fahrenheit. Never been able to adopt it. But Caroline Faraday, thank you ever so much. There you go. That was Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
Right, there you go. We're going to take a short break now. Before I go to break, I want to remind you that our big topic of conversation today is, does it matter if someone in the UK can't speak English? I mean, there's so many ways now of existing in life, and there are probably plenty of Brits abroad who can't speak the language where they've bought their retirement properties. So why are we moaning? Or should it be actually important that if you're coming to this country, you must have English? The number to call 03444 991000. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number or leave me a voice note. We are on text as well. 87222 is the number if you'd like to go old school and SMS me. Remember to write the word talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. I'm going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because I'm back after this.
you're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years, it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Look who's come into the studio! It's James Price, ladies and gentlemen. I love you, James. I mean, obviously you're my favourite because you're from Gloucester, and anyone who listens to my show all the time gets really annoyed when I bang on about it, but, you know, it's God's own city, sort of.
Definitely God's own county.
Definitely God's own county.
Absolutely.
Do you know I'm moving back there?
Where to?
Well, people will be like, you know...
Oh,
like,
of course, good point.
The east of the
Somewhere.
county.
Fabulous.
Because, well, you know, because I'm still working in London, so it's got to be commutable.
Yeah.
So I can't go back to Gloucester itself, but I'll be 20 minutes up the road from my parents. So I can go and hang out, go watch the cheese roll.
Fantastic. People haven't seen the cheese rolling, go look it up on YouTube.
It's
It would explain
important.
maybe some of our political opinions that we think that is a good day out.
It's a very weird, special place, Gloucester. I think there's a certain type of humour that comes from Gloucester as well, because we can boast what's his face.
Well, Fred West.
Okay. Yeah, we can boast Fred West. And
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird. Like the West Country is just full of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think someone even tried to claim that the cheese rolling was actually a Phoenician invention brought here sort of 2,000-something years ago because of very spurious evidence about cheese production. So maybe it's true.
Oh, bog
Let's
off,
go find
it's
out.
not. It's just a load of people who drink too much cider and think it's a great idea to throw themselves down a massive hill, because what could be more fun than that?
Absolutely.
Anyway, so that is all about Gloucester, ladies and gentlemen. That was unscripted, but I'm glad to say that James Price is here in the studio. We're going to do some calls now. Now, forewarning to the audience, James is not going to be privileged to be able to hear your call because he's got no earpiece in, but I'm going to ask him to answer it. It'll be fun. Let's speak to Ricky, who's in London. Hi, Ricky.
Good morning, Alex. I rang in at the start of the show when you were talking about cash machines, automatic cash machines, but I can offer an opinion on the English-speaking issue if you want.
You can offer me opinion on both if you like. Double up. Double your money.
I'll give you both then. You're going to get both barrels in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, regarding cash machines, I haven't got a problem with them. I'll tell you why, because when you go to the checkout and where there's someone on the checkout, what they're told to do is rush the goods through. They're given a certain amount of time to get all the goods through. Did you know that?
That I did. I used to be a cashier. If you've been listening to the programme, I told you I used to work at good old Safeway with Mr. West's daughter, actually. And it's true. You're actually sort of made to do a test where every now and then you have like the secret shopper, and then you have trial sessions where you sort of put the goods through the thing, and you have a little league table at the back in the staff canteen who's managed to put so many products through the conveyor belt. I was never that bothered about winning those competitions because, and the other thing is, you know, if it's a really busy day and you've got a queue extending to the back of the store, you've got to, you know, get on with getting on. That's good customer service. But when it's not, it's a chat, isn't it?
The trouble is, though, when you're packing, you know, you put all the stuff that's unbreakable, you like your yogurts and all that, because you want to put them at the top of your carrier bag because you don't want to break the lids of the yogurt.
Right.
But then the cashier, they give you it all out of order, don't they? So there's that issue as well. And another thing, I liken it. These automatic cash machines, I liken it to driving a car and having a choice between an automatic or a manual. When I get in my manual car, I don't drive an automatic. I don't look at the gear stick and go, "Oh, I really don't want to change gear." It's not. It's just automatic. So I don't see the difference between that. And
Right,
just
so, okay, so let's dive into this, because guess what? Lovely Phil Dave, my executive producer, has just crawled on his hands and knees into this studio like a rugrat to deliver an earpiece off camera to James Price, so he's picked up the last of that. We've been talking about self-checkouts today because Duncan Barks was with me earlier and he rallies against self-checkouts, and apparently there are some pensioners in Bridgewater in Somerset who are boycotting self-service because they think it's rubbish. And I'm kind of minded to agree. But what Ricky said, do you do this thing where when you're in a supermarket, I actually load the conveyor belt the way I want it to come off the other end from a bag packing?
Well, like you, I worked in a...
yeah, sorry.
Ricky feels passionately about this.
I agree. Like you, I worked in a supermarket as well. My throughput numbers were always through the roof as well.
What was your supermarket?
It was the Tesco in Brockworth. It's a great place. It's a fabulous
rivals.
place where dreams come true.
Did you have to remember the PLU codes for the vegetables as well? The sort of like 5263 for mandarins.
Exactly.
And then you'd get something like a piece of bread you didn't recognise, just like, I'm just whacking this through as
you sometimes panic and you get some mushrooms and you think, oh, is that citrus? No, of course it isn't. And we look in a different area for it. It's like the game Tetris when you do this stuff. But I've got an Anglo-futurist solution to this, right?
Anglo-futurist?
Oh yeah, this is, Britain made the modern world, and Anglo-futurism is this kind of growing philosophy that if we just get rid of all the crap that government is putting on us, we can do it again. We can invent all this new modern technology. So you can keep these fancy things that don't work. What we're going to have instead, right? We're going to have a robot that's going to be able to just follow us around and do all of it for us. And you just tell it your shopping list, and the robot's going to come along and do all the shopping, and it's going to interact with the thing for you, and then it will even drive you home. That's the solution.
If you're the spearhead of Anglo-futurism, which is great, can you make sure, a bit like, I never understood why Stephen Hawking's machine had an American accent. Can the robot be West Country?
I think absolutely it could. Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? And it'd be a lot less threatening as well.
Yeah.
You might be feared that if we're walking around with robots and drones, you'd have like a drone umbrella flying overhead to keep you dry. It would be a lot less threatening if it said, "All right, my love, don't you worry, we'll get you home in one piece." That'd be great.
I feel like we're persecuted, right? You can be a correspondent and be from Scotland, and they like an Edinburgh accent of the BBC. These days, it's acceptable to have a northern accent or a little lilt of Northern Irish, but you never get someone who's like, "I'm in Gaza."
I think all the kind of security warnings at railway stations should be put into West Country, right? Instead of any bag that's left unattended will be destroyed by the security services, it will instead be, here, don't feed the pigeons, right? I think that would be a much more pleasant commuting experience.
I think it would be. Someone played me a video, going massively off topic here, but hey, it's my show, we do as we want. Someone played me a video. There's a Gloucester in Massachusetts. Right? And if you look at on YouTube the announcements for the train in Massachusetts coming up to the station, because people say the West Country accent is the one that was imported to America that made the American accent, and Gloucester in Massachusetts, the guy's like, next station, Gloucester!
Oh,
it's
fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which is much better than most Americans. And again, my fiancé American, nothing against them, and their total inability to pronounce Worcestershire sauce. When you get Worcestershire sauce, it's hilarious.
They don't know.
Cool and unusual for them.
You can always tell the tourist in Gloucestershire because they'll be like Gloucester and then Cirencester. And no, it's Cirencester and Gloucester, by the way.
I can do a West Country accent, Alex.
You can do one?
Go on.
Yeah.
Go on, love. Wait, Bummer?
You're going to like it, but you might not like it. Here it goes, right? I can't read and I can't write, but I can drive a tractor.
Yeah.
Well, it's all right. I like the fact it had a bit of a sing-song to it. Was that a Wurzel song by any chance? Now, James and I are going to show you how it's done properly. Ready? A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3. I can't read.
And I can't write. But that don't really matter, because I come from Gloucestershire and I can drive a tractor. Oh, God.
Hey,
this is great radio.
This is amazing. Ricky, thank you ever so much. That was Ricky from London, very much not from God's Own County. Let's speak now to Alice, who's in Manchester. Hi, Alice.
Morning, Alex. Morning, James.
Good morning. Right, what do you want to talk about? And it doesn't have to be the West Country accent, by the way. That was accidental shift in schedule.
What I wanted to speak about was your question today about speaking English question. I work on Universal Credit as a work coach, so I'm on the front line. So, and it's deeply frustrating now because there's nobody speaking. They come in, there's no real sort of courses available. There are courses, but not enough for what we need. And they're just we're just finding it. For me personally, finding it really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, James, we do now live. The thing is, what I find so hypocritical about, let's say, the sort of the liberal elites in metropolitan cities is they will say, oh, these poor migrants, of course we should provide translators. I mean, how would you like it? Go doctor. But then if they, saw someone who was in Benidorm having their fish and chips and pint of lager by the sea, fumbling through their Spanish or just saying, beer, please, they'd be like, oh, that's disgraceful. You've gone to Spain and you don't even speak the language, not even eating tapas.
This stuff is absolutely extraordinary, and it's great to hear somebody at the front line actually trying to do useful, decent services for people who are well-meaning and actually need it and deserve it, and finding it's impossible to do because people don't speak any English. There are more English language speakers in China than there are in the United States, right? It's so easy to learn English now. It is the world's, ironically, lingua franca. If you get all the way here across Europe and you can't speak English, why not? And if you don't speak English and if you've been here for a certain period of time and you can't learn to speak it, why on earth are taxpayers being taxed at the highest rate they've ever been taxed, even higher, I think, now than it was almost in World War II, in order to receive these kinds of services? If you cannot speak English, or maybe in some quarters Welsh, there is no way that you can contribute either to the economy or to society or to culture in any way, shape or form. You are never going to be anything other than a net drag here.
Yeah, Alice?
No. I mean, the thing is, and that's it, there's no sanctions, there's no test. So they come in, you get 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you get an extra 10 minutes because they don't speak English to ring a translator to be able to converse. And this is week in, week out.
To then apply to basically be paid to be here when they don't contribute. Because this is the thing, as James was saying, if you're going to contribute to the economy, whether you're working on a production line or as a doctor, you need the language. So if people are turning up without English, and then they're demanding a translator so we can pay them to be here.
But also, I would say as well is that, like somebody had mentioned before, that if you just make out that you don't speak English, they understand. As soon as you say you're not going to get any money, you're going to lose your benefit, they understand.
That's extraordinary.
It is, and I see. I have a caseload. They come in. And it's so frustrating because you say, what have you done to look to work? And they just look at you blankly. So, you say, right, OK, then you're going to lose your benefit. And the next week they come in and they may have tried, but it's really difficult when you've got 20 minutes to work with that person and then you've got a diary of people. And this is what we're finding. It's absolutely staggering. And I don't believe that any minister that will want to come and sit in job centres to see what is actually happening, because they won't come and speak to us because they wouldn't like what we had to say.
Oh, well, we didn't like what you had to say in many respects, but we really appreciated you phoned us up and gave us the truth about what is going on in this country. We all sense it, we all know it, but when you speak to someone who's on the coalface, whose job it is to deal with these situations, it really does bring it home, doesn't it? Alice, thank you ever so much for your call. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, James Price is going to be staying with us, and there's lots more news and views and debate just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, coming up, we've got our head-to-head. But before that, our call-out question for today is, why does it matter if someone in the UK can't speak English? There are plenty of Brits abroad who may not be able to speak the language where they are living. Is it right that we provide translation services? Can you still contribute to the economy if English is not your first language? Well, let us know your thoughts. The number to call, 0344 499 1000, standard network rate. You can use that number as well on WhatsApp to leave me a message or even leave me a voice note. If you'd prefer to text, it's 87222. Remember to write the word talk before your message. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our head-to-head.
Head-to-head.
Well, welcome to Head to Head. I'm joined by James Price and John McTurnan, one representing the right, one representing the left. Right, are you ready for some verbal fisticuffs, gentlemen?
Of course.
Queensbury rules,
Keep
right?
it clean, but keep it mean. Right,
rules.
now, let's kick off. Where are we going to kick off? Let's kick off with this one. Furious driving lessons for refugees granted asylum cost you, the taxpayer, almost £30,000 in just 3 years. The figures relate to just one local authority after campaigners uncovered the expense. Right, so John, is it right that we are giving refugees driving lessons?
A driving licence is access to the labour market. It is as significant as having a university degree in terms of whether you can actually get into the labour market. People with no driving licence are locked out of the labour market. People should be able to work and contribute to the economy that's giving them a home.
Well, I think that you see an awful lot of very bad driving at the moment these days. You see very bad driving, especially on mopeds as well. And every moped in London seems to have an L plate. Maybe, you know, some level of requiring these people to have some decent training would be good. But in America now, they already have driverless cars. So why are we importing lots of people over here who can't speak the language, who are from different cultures, when pretty soon that job is going to be entirely redundant and a robot's going to be able to do it for us?
Are you proposing driverless cars should be given to refugees? I think that's quite a controversial position.
No, I think the driverless cars should be available here, and we don't need, therefore, so many economic migrants to come over. Refugees, well, I think that would be different. Then we could just give them access if they make various other kind of qualifying circumstances. That would be okay. But I think that we already do an awful lot, and we don't do it very well as it is. You know, the vast majority of refugees are young, working-age males rather than the most vulnerable people. Let's perhaps get them over first.
I mean, is it fair, though, that these people are getting those driving lessons for free? We know the wait time on taking a driving test is incredibly long these days, so I understand. And driving, you know, doing driving lessons costs a load of money. I was a checkout girl in Safeways to pay for my own driving lessons.
The biggest threat to driving lessons in London at the moment is all these low traffic networks everywhere. They've actually closed the biggest car testing driving centre in the whole of the country in Hither Green. Used to be in Hither Green. You could drive around, do all the tests, everything there. So there's lots of factors affecting why there's a long backlog, a long wait for an essential thing, a driving licence, which is my point, which is if you want to integrate people into the economy, they need to get a job. If you want to get a job, you need to have a car. There's hardly anywhere in the country where a car doesn't help you actually get a job. And I think the idea that we want to get more people into work, I think, is actually one that, even though we're dualling, we actually do agree with.
Controversial opinion. Perhaps if we're going to start giving a driving licence to migrants, maybe Uber should pay for it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. But again,
tax on big tech should definitely be higher. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Other than the taxpayer, certainly.
Now let's move on to our next topic. Rachel Reeves, she's the latest in the Labour Party to be shown up for having accepted freebies. Oh, I forgot the freebies conversation. This time she's accepted free tickets to Sabrina Carpenter. I don't even know who that is. Worth up to £1,000. She sat in a corporate box to watch the gig at the O2 Arena, where some resale tickets cost almost £1,000. Now, why is it that going to this woman's pop concert is going to now help Rachel Reeves manage the economy, John McTurnan?
I think everybody needs to have a time to rest. I'm going to Fabric tonight. That's what.
Are you?
Yeah.
Woo, woo, woo,
See, DJ Nobu, a very, very great Japanese techno guy. But anyway, we all need time out.
Can we just take a breath here? Because I had no idea John McTurnan was a techno rave head who's off to Fabric.
Yeah.
I love this.
You got to keep listening to new
What
music.
are you going to wear, by the way? You're going to do this?
I'm not going to wear a suit. I'm going to wear more casual gear. I've got raves.
Dinner jacket, surely.
Have you?
No.
I've
got my rave trainers. I'll wear my rave trainers.
Do you have all the sort of like the kit you get from that? What's that place called in Camden Market? It's a Cyber Dog, I think.
Yeah,
it is.
no,
I don't. Do you have a whistle?
I don't. No.
No whistle.
It's hard end Japanese techno. It's hard end.
Oh, is there a uniform for the hard end?
Yeah, more like t-shirts and chinos.
Okay. This is amazing. This is like a whole new world to me. I just want to know riff on John McDermott at the hard end of Japanese techno. This is brilliant. Right, anyway, so is Angela Rayner going with you?
No, but she'd be very welcome to go anywhere with me. She is fun. F-U-N.
I bet. Do you know what? I think if there's one thing to say about Angela Rayner, it probably that she is quite fun. Now, does that excuse the fact that the Chancellor, knowing that all this freebie stuff has been in the papers, is accepting tickets to a concert that a lot of other people would love to have access to? It's not good optics,
I suppose the question is, can she be influenced to change her policies on anything because she went to the O2? And I don't think she can. She's always loved music. I remember her raving about going to pun not intended, but raving about going to see Beyonce in the O2. So she does love music, and I think it's fair enough to have a night off and go to see an artist you want.
I mean, do you think the excuse then, James, is going to be that, look, she might be able to afford those tickets herself? One assumes the Chancellor isn't paid in pennies, but she needs to have the corporate box for her own safety. Do you think that's fair? Or should she be more like Rishi Sunak, who just was in the stands of Southampton Football Club, mingling with the common folk?
I do think there's the accommodations that should be made for people's security, if you're at risk and things like that. And I also controversially think that politicians are paid far, far too little. And what happens when you pay peanuts? You get monkeys. The quality of parliamentarians of all parties has been on a precipitous slide, the kind of slide that you see in the cheese rolling for decades now. Very low quality people, I'm afraid, and results are obvious for all to see. In Singapore, the Prime Minister gets paid $1 million a year. The Transport Secretary of Singapore went to prison last year. He was on something like $850,000, and he took a couple of tickets to the F1, boom, landed him in prison. So I think there's a happy medium that we can get between some of this stuff.
No freebies, but $1 million, $1 million. Yeah, well,
and then you'd get high quality. But I think that the best thing to do would be to peg all politicians' salaries to the strength of the economy. And as the economy shrunk yesterday, I think the announcement came out by 0.1%. So all of this going for growth stuff, because of Rachel Reeves, in part because of Rachel Reeves' own budget, the economy is doing worse. She should get a pay cut. The economy starts going gangbusters. She can do whatever she wants.
How old is Rachel Reeves?
Early 40s?
Early 40s. Yeah.
I'm early 40s. I don't even know Sabrina Carpenter is. And I kind of find like when Sir Keir Starmer, 46, Phil tells me that's the age of Rachel Reeves, when Keir Starmer went to the Taylor Swift concert, I'm like, what are you doing there, you sado? Now, you go into hard-end Japanese techno is the opposite of sado. That's like the coolest thing I've ever heard.
And John's paying for his own ticket, I presume, as well.
I remember Starmer on Good Morning Britain. I go, oh, yes, I went to a Taylor Swift concert with my kids to try and look normal.
To be fair to politicians, they spend. Rachel's very funny when she tells stories about going home to her kids, and they do have to sacrifice some family time. And I think if you've got kids who like Taylor Swift, and you are the Prime Minister, I think fair enough if that's a treat you can give them. If you've got kids who like football, it's fair enough that you can take your kids to football. I think it is one of those things where I don't believe you should fetishise family life, but I think if we take politicians away from normal bits of family life and they can't give some treats to their kids, that would be a harsh society to live in.
I'd have sympathy for that, by the way, if it wasn't for the fact that, say, on the football, there's a football regulator coming in, and again, Tories started this, Labour carrying it on. Ridiculous. Premier League is great, you don't need that. And if it wasn't for the fact that the nightlife in this country, fabric excluded, is suffering massively because of NIMBYs and local councils and everywhere else, so live music venues are suffering. Again, if politicians want to have it for themselves, they should want it to be okay for everybody else.
I think the politicians who go to take tickets like Rachel's done should campaign for a wider access to music venues. I think they should campaign against the NIMBYs who move into an area like this, which become gentrified because it's become funky, and then they try to stop it being funky.
How about what would look pretty good optically is if she says, look, I want to go to this Sabrina Carpenter show with my kids, for security reasons I can't be there in the throngs, so I'm going to take the corporate box, and what I'm going to do is the money that this ticket would have costed, I'm going to pay for someone else to have tickets to the show. That would be great optics.
People can't be. It's very hard to start dictating to people they should give to charity, for example. Like the thing about charity is given out of your own free will. But I think when it comes down to it, we're a bit too puritanical in this country. I think we're a Protestant country. We are suspicious of people who have fun, and I think it's best to have politicians who know how to have fun.
Does Boris Johnson having cake during COVID fit into that category? Because it wasn't exactly a bunga party, was it?
No, but I also believe it was the tip of the iceberg, and I think the investigation into him was more of a cover-up than exposing.
Well, I literally wrote a column a few weeks ago describing Rachel Reeves as Reeves the Roundhead. I definitely think we should all be allowed to be more cavalier, but that means not banning smoking. It means taking taxes down off things like booze and fags. Again, letting people have more fun and stop trying to have the state control every damn aspect of people's lives. If you want to go and do that,
on smoking, everybody knows that a cigarette is the only consumer good sold that if you use it correctly, use it the way it's designed to be used, it kills you.
Well, that is very true. I mean, everyone knows smoking kills. I mean, that's like basically if you smoked a cigarette and didn't inhale or lit it and just like threw it in the bin or down the toilet, then I quite like that. Before we go to break, one quick one, we've got to be quick on this. You're talking about state control, nanny state. 9 in 10 head teachers have had pupils skip lessons for family holidays this year. Is that right? Because we all know we're talking about politicians and kids and family life being able to do X, Y and Z.
I'm a puritan on that. You should go to school. You only have 15,000 days in school if you stay until 18. So therefore, if you skip a single one, you could skip a vital lesson.
But what about hard-working mum and dad who simply cannot afford the out-of-term time holiday because the prices are massively artificially inflated?
Well,
they're saying we don't have a holiday unless we go during term time.
The problem's with capitalism.
No, the problem is the state air passenger duty makes those flights more expensive, and again, it's the economy that is suffering because of politicians with excess regulation. If everybody was much richer, they wouldn't have a problem trying to afford holidays, and therefore they could get their kids in school.
But do you think it's all right? Do you think it's all right for parents to take their kids out of school saying, look, we're going on our family holiday? They'll catch up when they're back, but we need our holiday.
I think that some common sense works on this, and that if you know that the parents are good eggs who are taking them off to museums, I think that's a bit different than if they're just trying to get away with it.
The truant's charter. Well, Mr McTurnan was a truant earlier today, weren't you? Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because more is coming up just after this.
You're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault, that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years, it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Right, we are sticking with our head-to-head part 2. I've got John McTernan, who is representing the left, and James Price representing the right. Yeah, come on, guys, that's right. I want a bit of that, OK, now, I want your thoughts. I'm going to go to James first. We're switching it up this time. Foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers face an immigration crackdown with a review of the ECHR. This is news today. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is reviewing how Article 8 is being applied in immigration courts to make sure the law is being interpreted in a sensible way. This is after countries such as Denmark interpret it vastly differently. You don't like the chicken nuggets? Who cares? Now, I want to ask you this. When the ECHR said to Britain, you need to give prisoners the vote, we just ignored them. Can she tell judges what to do?
Well, that's a very dangerous slippery slope, I suppose, in some ways. Parliament is sovereign, Parliament should be sovereign, and Parliament should legislate to do what it wants, and therefore what it should do is legislate out all of the areas in which the ECHR applies in British law, in the Human Rights Act 1998 and all these other kind of things, because what you then get to do is not have to worry about ignoring things and disapplying it and all the rest of it. They will be there in law, and you can have ministers saying, if you don't like chicken nuggets, tough, or the bloke who won't be deported to Pakistan because Pakistan doesn't treat paedophiles very well because he was a paedophile, or the man who was actually deported to Ghana but it's made him depressed, so he's allowed to come back again, and there's also the lady who won't be deported to the Caribbean because she said her Latvian husband wouldn't like the spicy food. We want to get rid of all of that kind of stuff, and I think the way you do that is by changing the law and disapplying all this stuff and making Parliament sovereign, not a foreign court.
Right, John, I mean, when you listen to some of these cases, they do make a mockery of our system, but does it not just rest on the judges being more sensible as judges? Have we gone too far with the way we apply the ECHR? Would you even be open to leaving it altogether?
The ECHR is, I have to say, as a man of the left, one of the greatest contributions that Conservatives have ever made to Europe and to Britain. The ECHR was drafted by a Conservative after his experience of the Nuremberg trials about war crimes. So we've given, from Britain, we've given something important in the ECHR and the human rights in the Convention. And I think the idea that we should either take away human rights from everybody.
No, I'm going to have to jump in on this. This is not what it's about. This is just rot.
You can't jump.
This idea they don't have human rights in America or in Australia or in Canada or in Japan or in New Zealand.
Your proposition is utter rot. You're the one that's saying, you said to the viewers and listeners, you believe that Human Rights Act should be disapplied. That's everybody in Britain who'd lose their human rights if your approach.
It's so unbelievably factuous and untrue.
No, your
that
approach
is not true. The Human Rights Act doesn't exist in Australia. Do they have no rights in Australia? Of course not.
The thing is, I'm proud of being British, and I'm proud of the rights that British voters have, British citizens have. And your idea is people in Britain should have no rights when stopped by the cops because
it's just such a lie. This is such a lie.
You're saying a young black kid in Peckham stopped by the cops can say, do you know what? There's rights in Australia, and also, do you know what? There is no Human Rights Act in Australia. that you don't have access to the same protection.
But when it comes to the migrants, because we've been indulged, haven't we?
Human rights should be for everybody, irrespective of whether you are young or old.
When it comes to these cases, because we have had loads and loads and loads of examples where people are not being deported because they keep challenging deportation orders, and they're having retrials like 2, 3, 4, 5 times, which the taxpayer paying both sides of the argument. They're paying the legal case for the person who should be deported and the legal case for the government, and they get multiple strikes, and then it ends up with saying, well, they're not going to be deported, they're a criminal, but their son doesn't like the chicken nuggets back at home. I mean, surely this is not just about this. That makes a mockery of human rights, doesn't it?
We don't make laws, we don't provide human rights in our country, thankfully, because of what we've read in tabloid stories. We have human rights because of Parliament. The UK Parliament sets the laws of the country. The Human Rights Act was passed by UK Parliament. It's applied by UK judges, and people who go to court, right, because we're a free country, they can appeal. They can go to court and they can appeal, and we have a process. And we cannot say justice is too expensive. Justice is a process that everybody who lives in Britain, every citizen in Britain, should have access to.
But
the idea there should be some penny pinching approach or some approach that says you're brown, you don't have access to these rights.
No, hang on. I've really got to come back on this. That is absolutely outrageous to suggest that is in any way anything I've said at any point here, sir. No. I will not stand for that. In this country, you're right, we should be very proud of what we did in Nuremberg because it was Britain who stood alone against the Nazis, all this stuff. And the reason that we put some of these things in was because there had been a terrible violation of human rights in Europe. It was never intended to allow paedophiles to be able to stay in this country against the will of people. Parliament is sovereign. What that means is Parliament, if it wants to, can create all kinds of laws. Yes, very good. What it means is that we can do whatever we want in terms of Parliament. If it does it passes a law, that happens, right? It doesn't mean that we can't ever change it. No Parliament can bind the hands of its successor, another important part of our Constitution. The idea that before Tony Blair came along with the Human Rights Act in 1998, that everybody was under some kind of arbitrary justice and everybody was just going around killing each other and beating each other up, and that happens in every other country where you don't have either the British Human Rights Act or the ECHR, is obviously untrue. And to suggest that this means that I'm in favour of brown kids being able to be beaten up is something that you should apologise for and retract right now. It's outrageous. There's head-to-head for you.
I don't see why I should have to apologise for something I didn't say. I'm saying that the people who attack migrants, by and large, do not like the fact that migrants are a different colour.
Hold on. We're not talking about attacking migrants here. We're talking about people who are criminals and whether or not they should be deported, which I would say if you've broken the law of this country, you're a criminal, you should. Now, that doesn't matter if they are from France, white, or Jamaica.
I personally have a very strong concern about the idea that Britain should take back everybody who's British citizen, who's been convicted of a crime anywhere in the world. I mean, where's this end? People commit crimes in our country, and people should serve time in our country. That's the process there should be. Crime is the punishment. There's not deportation. Is not a
even though our jails are full to bursting.
Yeah. Sorry.
Even though our jails are full to bursting, because we know that starting 2026 we're going to have another release of prisoners because there's not enough spaces on our prison estates.
We don't have enough prison places because my friend beside me was representing a force in politics which decided for 14 years not to build new prisons. Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, said there will be a place for every person who's sentenced, and that has to be the aspiration, as well as, there has to be the aspiration that we have decent rehabilitation.
But perhaps we need so many prison spaces because when you look at the statistics on organised crime in this country, a huge amount of it, the vast majority now, is actually being conducted by people who are not from this country. And you can look at the Organised Crime Index and see the statistics on that, particularly Albanian gangs consolidating a lot of the illicit industries.
Are you saying that decent, ordinary British people are just not good enough at organised crime?
No, I'm just saying the statistics. If you look at the OCI, if you look at the Organised Crime Index, it's all there. That's the sort of database which is correlated by the CIA, by the FBI, by Interpol, by Europol, by our own police forces. The majority of organised crime in the United Kingdom is being conducted by foreign gangs. That's just a fact.
The Metropolitan Police have got a very good record of actually smashing organised crime in London, which is they're actually advising police forces all across the world on how to.
Yeah, I've noticed all the boarded up shops on my local streets. It tends to suggest that that's working really well. We're going to move on. Let's talk about this. It's going to get the blood boiling again. This is talking about sickness benefits, and benefits claimants of minor mental health problems should be rejected, and so today they are to be rejected. This is after more than 1.8 million people are now on the highest rate of universal credit without support to look for work, compared with just 360,000 5 years ago. That's risen by nearly 70%, and there's a huge cohort of this, of people who say they have mental health issues. John, do we not need to start getting tough with people and say, actually, work is very good for your mental health? You can't just sit at home saying I'm depressed and take off the state.
The government should be ashamed of putting out misleading statistics which are borderline to being a lie.
They're going to be in the Labour government.
The current government should be ashamed of the press statement that they put out with those figures in it. They know, you know, the transition to universal credit has been going on for years, and that is why there are more people on universal credit at every level of universal credit than there have been in the past. That's simply a fact of a process that changes.
But on the story, if you've got a mental health condition,
and also. The process that the benefit system currently has, inherited from the Conservatives, is not that there is support for people to go into work.
We've only got about 45 seconds left, so I just want a quick answer from you. If you've got a minor mental health condition, should you be on benefits?
You should be in the NHS. And you should be being treated.
James, very quickly, because we've got about 30 seconds.
The best welfare programme in the world is giving someone the dignity of a job and a right to work, and that people should be encouraged to do that.
Except
the reason that
pensioners.
universal credit came along was because for so many people under the last Labour government, it made a lot more sense for them to just sit at home and be given benefits paid for by hard-working taxpayers. But that we should change. We should get as many people who are capable of working into work. People who can't, shouldn't, they should be supported, but there shouldn't be space for scroungers.
John, James, thank you ever so much. That was a spicy head-to-head. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in the studio. Right, they're going somewhere, but I am not. I'll be back after this break with more news and more views. I'm with you until 10 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'll see you in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. We've managed to make it a whole 3 hours without talking about what's going on in the rest of the world, other than finding out, checking in on what's going on in America's domestic news. Unlike me not to be rattling the cage of geopolitics, well, you need wait no longer, because I am going to dive deep into the toing and froing over Ukraine. I mean, whose side is Trump on? 1 minute, definitely not on Zelensky's side. Kind of seen tacitly on Putin's side. Well, I think things might be changing. Is this the art of the deal? Because Trump has turned around and said if Russia doesn't do the right thing and back the ceasefire, he says there'll be World War III nuclear war if these peace talks fail, saying there'll be a war like no other. And it could erupt very easily. That is after, of course, Putin was very intransigent when it came to the idea of a 30-day ceasefire. So he said, I like the idea of a ceasefire, but only if Ukraine never joins NATO, there are no foreign forces, we get to keep everything we've got, i.e. we just press stop and I win, which doesn't seem sensible to me. But is this now about to change? Because there is, I think, this sort of feeling in Europe that Trump was cozying up to the Kremlin a bit too much, laying all the blame on Zelensky. Was that a tactic to make Zelensky realise he's got to have, he's going to have to give something if he wants the fighting to stop, and now he's going to turn his focus on to Putin? Well, who better to ask than Philip Ingram, Big Phil, former senior military intelligence officer. Philip, great to have you on the programme. What do you make of these latest developments? Because normally Putin's the one rattling the cage saying, oh, well, if you do this, if you do that, I've got big weapons, I've got Satan 3. Ooh, look at my big missiles, I'm going to parade them through the streets of Moscow, you better beware. And European leaders go, oh, we can't poke the bear, we can't poke the bear. And now it's Donald Trump saying, if Russia doesn't get real and get to the table, there will be World War III. What do you make of this?
Yeah, well, Putin's always done the my missile's bigger than your missile approach. Europe realizes that the Russian missile backed by threat is bigger than anything that Europe has got, and has always rolled back. But Trump is now in an unpredictable state, because one interview or one statement that he put out last night, which you didn't mention, was he turned around and talked about the Ukrainians being surrounded in Kursk, and then turned around and said the Ukrainians should never have attacked someone that's bigger than them. It was never going to end well. So whilst he was making strongish statements against Putin, he was going back to attacking Zelensky again. So this is Trump's unpredictability. Whether he has wholeheartedly changed and is going to live up to the threats that he's put against Vladimir Putin, or whether he's trying to maneuver Putin into coming back with another offer for the deal, it's unclear. But then everything that comes out of Trump is unclear, and how much logic there is behind it is very difficult to assess.
I mean, we all know that Trump wants to go down in history as the one who negotiated a peace. We all know that Putin is not going to want to do that and be seen to have lost in any way, shape or form. We've always said from the beginning, a lot of people said you need to build Putin a golden bridge. He's got to be able to sell some sort of a win back at home, and he's made his terms very clear. Is all this sabre rattling from Trump actually super dangerous? I mean, you've worked senior military intelligence officer. How close have we been when it comes to the Cold War of someone pressing a big red button, or is this just all theatrics in public?
Oh, no, it's definitely not theatrics in public. The closest we ever came to the big red button being pushed was in 1983. Everyone thinks the Cuban Missile Crisis. No. 1983, large NATO exercise across Europe. The Russians thought that this was a precursor to an invasion, in the same way that Russians run major exercises before they invade countries. That was just after Reagan had announced Star Wars, and all of that was coming in. So Russia was, your finger was literally hovering over the button. And if it wasn't for a Russian intelligence officer called Oleg Gordievsky, who was actually being run as an agent by MI6, and his insights being played both sides, that button could have been pushed. So Putin is of a similar ilk in what's going on, but he's got a greater visibility of the reality. Trump his threatening approach, his unpredictability is causing, on one hand, other leaders around the world to go, I'm not sure what quite's going on here, so I might wait to make a decision before I do anything until I see what's happening. But what he's also doing is he's causing so much confusion and disruption across the world that other despots, and here I'm looking at Xi Jinping, might turn around and go, actually, there's so much going on around the rest of the world. If I go and take Taiwan now, nobody's going to be too bothered by it, and therefore might go for it.
But how do we get to an end to this war of attrition? There's lots of shoulda, woulda, coulda that's spoken about. Well, if we had applied all the sanctions we could have applied at the beginning on Russia, if we'd given Ukraine the arms they need, if perhaps we'd even did this now. My understanding is we only apply about 30% of the sanctions we could place on Russia. But the problem is none of that has happened. Russia has taken territory. Everyone wants the war to stop because war is not good. And Putin is not about to agree to something that says, oh, sorry, probably shouldn't have gone into Ukraine. Here you go, have it all back. So what is the resolution here?
Well, this is where people think war is an activity by itself. It's not. It's diplomacy by other means. It's whenever the politicians talking to each other have failed somewhere. Either they've refused to talk, or they've got ambitions that are that take them into wanting to steal something. And that's just what Putin did. There's a lot of disinformation around who's winning and who's losing. If we go to the east in a tactical position, in the last 24, 48 hours, Ukraine has been making advances in some areas. The Russians have been making advances in the other areas. But we're talking of a few hundred meters, a kilometer here and there. The battle, the whole conflict is not going to be won or lost on what happens in the east unless the Ukrainian defences collapse, which they haven't done in the last 3 years, and the Russians have the ability to punch through. They don't have the military might to do that. The battle is going to be won or lost on what's happening at what we call the operational level. So your ability to continue to prosecute the war, to feed personnel, equipment, fuel, everything to the front lines to allow that effective stalemate to continue. The Russians are losing in that battle and losing quite badly. And then the war will be ended at the strategic level, this geopolitical level where you get hopefully the two leaders sitting down and talking, but the international influence that's coming into that. That's what Trump is doing. He's banging heads together. But this is because the war in Europe is not Trump's priority. The potential for a war in Southeast Asia is. What's going on in the Middle East is, because those both affect US domestic politics hugely. But it's the growth of China that he is most concerned about. He wants Europe gone. He wants it off his to-do list so that he can start to focus and concentrate on other things. And he's approaching it in the same way he approaches all of his businesses and business deals, by bullying his way through and trying to play both sides off against each other, which makes it very, very difficult to read from a geopolitical perspective, because he's working outside all of the norms, and his top team that are supporting him are very, very politically naive. They have not run major departments. They've not got this wider geopolitical sense, and therefore it's impossible to read them as well, because a lot of their naivety is being played by the master that Putin and Lavrov are.
But this is the thing. What has happened quite clearly is Trump's come into the White House, and rather than things just like rumbling along as they have been, with nobody doing enough to make things end or nobody grabbing the nettle, that is what Trump is doing. And Europe have been found wanting, haven't they?
Yeah.
But
Sir
Keir Starmer seems to want to be trying to make amends to that situation, putting out a press statement saying Putin needs to sort this out. Putin needs to agree to the peace deal. And then previously, of course, saying that the UK would provide peacekeeping forces in some sort of demilitarized zone. Is there any sort of indication that Europe now could sort of wrest control of this situation from Donald Trump and do what should have been done 3 years ago?
Well, you know what Europe's like when it comes to trying to make a decision. Have we ever seen a decision come out of Europe? Virtually impossible. And this is where UK can lead, because we have done in previous operations, implementing the Dayton Peace Agreement in Bosnia, implementing the peace agreements and the actions into Kosovo. We planned it, we coordinated, we pulled it together, and we pulled Europe into that under a NATO framework. But it doesn't matter what the framework is, we've got the experience in doing that. Keir Starmer needs to step up a little bit more from putting out press statements and writing stiff letters and talking about jam tomorrow. 2.7% of GDP on defence from 2027 is jam tomorrow, especially whenever the first 2 or 3 years of that is going to go and pay for the Chagos Island deal. He needs to bring that today and start to step up. Europe is starting to step up, and that is a good thing from a European defence perspective. But actually, when it comes to economics and defence economics, Donald Trump is probably hurting the US defence industrial base by forcing Europe to grow its defence industrial base, because it's bringing competition into an area where effectively there was little competition and US industry ran roughshod all over it. So there's so many moving parts going on here. The complexities of it at every different level are huge. Good things, Europe stepping up. Good thing, the UK is trying to take a leadership, but Keir Starmer needs to step up a little bit more. Is Trump bothered by Europe? No, he sees the EU as a massive competition bloc, and he just wants to disrupt it as much as possible. But what we're seeing here are disrupt. That is creating fissures in geopolitics. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin love fissures because they crawl into them. They further their own interests. They wiggle those fissures into become chasms, and that's what they're going to try and do. We're going to see more delay from Putin as he tries to do that with what's going on in Ukraine.
Is there any way in which this can be resolved with Putin being smacked down? Is there any way that actually getting the ceasefire on the table will be a great interim pause to the fighting, and then perhaps with Donald Trump's drill baby drill policy, the Russian economy can be so undermined that he can't come back for more? Or is that idea for the birds?
No, it's not. And that could happen very quickly indeed. But then there are consequences of that. The Russian economy is collapsing at the moment. Russia's ability at the operational level to continue to support its operations in the east of Ukraine. Remember, Russia has lost the conflict strategically. It has failed in its strategic goals, which was in the first few days to topple the Zelensky government and turn Ukraine into a puppet state like Belarus. And therefore it's trying to wrestle some form of win in the east. But if you look at what the Ukrainians are doing, they're attacking the Russian oil industry, they're attacking Moscow, they're attacking Russian cities, they're attacking logistic dumps, they're attacking command and control dumps, railway sites, airfields across Russia. And Russia can't deal with that. If we heavily sanction the Russian grey fleet of shipping that's going around, if we allowed the Ukrainians to use long-range weapons that we have supplied to attack Russian military targets inside Russia, Russia would collapse. And by collapse, I mean would come to the negotiating table without all of these wants very, very quickly indeed, because Putin's whole regime would collapse. If Putin's regime collapsed, there's a danger that the Russian Federation would break apart. And this is something that Donald Trump will have his eyes on, because if the Russian Federation breaks apart, China will go and try and secure the bits of the Russian Federation that it has got deals with Putin over for China's tacit support through this conflict. And it'll make the breakup of Yugoslavia seem like a bit of a Sunday school picnic.
Wow. I mean, geopolitics is a fascinating world. I don't know what the way out is, Phil. It's always great to have your analysis. Thank you so much for coming on the programme and giving us all a schooling in what is going on in this world. And I think we've just got to keep our eyes on it every single day. You never know. I don't think anyone's ever predicted the outbreak of a war. 1 minute they're talking about it, then people take their eye off the ball, and then it happens. So yeah, a lot to brace ourselves for. This is going to go on for quite some time, I'd imagine. That was Philip Ingram. Right, we're going to take a short break now. When I'm back after the break, let's lighten the mood a little bit. I'm going to be joined by the wonderful Steve Denyer, and we are going to be talking about entertainment. So strap yourselves in. Things are about to get fun. See you after this.
you're suggesting that this is all it's all Rachel Reeves' fault that there's no growth.
Well, it is. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, but normally when I say what public spending would you cut, you go foreign aid, but they've cut that. So what next?
I've never actually said that. I don't think I've ever said that. Well, I wouldn't be giving minimum 18 billion pounds to the Chagos Islands.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Mauritius.
That's 90 million a year. It's pocket money.
Well, it's not pocket money because amortised over the years it's going to be 52 billion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, as promised, it's time to lighten the mood. Sit back, pull that slanket up to your chin, and enjoy the company of Steve Denyer, who's going to tell us everything going on in the world of entertainment.
Good morning.
Hello, Doug. How David Bull does 4 hours. I mean, I'm sort of getting to the stage now where I'm sort of like, the alarm went off at 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it?
Done
It's
3 hours like this, and I'm like, oh, thank God Steve's here.
So you just want me to talk solidly for 10 minutes? We should...
I'm joking.
Listen, we need to address, we've been starting on this story for the last few weeks, the Gene Hackman story.
Oh, my goodness.
Utterly incredible. I mean, it was so shocking, wasn't it, a couple of weeks ago? And I knew that there'd be more into this. Do you remember the Santa Fe authorities were saying, look, there's nothing fishy here. They both passed away and what have you. And then we found out they were in different rooms and that a dog had passed away.
So last time I checked in on this, because, all I knew, wife, Jean, dog, dead.
Yes.
And people are like, this looks weird. And then they're like, well, he has Alzheimer's. She then died of some infection.
Some rodent infection that's really rare.
He then with his Alzheimer's, I don't know, does nothing about it because he's got Alzheimer's, doesn't realise his wife's dead or something like that.
Yeah.
So he then sort of has also died from probably not being able to look after himself. And the
family haven't seen them for months.
Also not being able to look after itself or something. And I was like, God, this is the most tragic domino effect I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Are you about to tell me actually that that's not what happened?
Well, no, so what's happening now is there's loads of legal wranglings about who gets the money because he was worth $80 million, at least $80 million. And the way it was set up before, he's 95 and she's in her 60s, she's 65, so she would have got the money had he passed away first. But because they were both found dead, the latest is this is a bit of a wrangling. The family haven't spoken to them, as in the daughters hadn't seen them. So at the moment, they're trying to work it out. And they're trying to work out who died first, and it was seemingly would be her. So does it go back to his estate? How does it get sorted? The family have been very quiet about this, as in the daughters and stuff. It was really weird. The younger kids weren't speaking to the couple. They hadn't seen them for a couple of months. And it's a dreadful state of affairs. They both lay dead for a matter of a couple of weeks, and nobody
when you've
knew.
got all of that money, how have you not got sort of the American equivalent of a district nurse, like popping in to see you, carers, staff, someone who would be like, well, old Mrs. Hackman's no longer with us, we better look after Jean. Like, well, how does it evolve into every single living thing in that household passes away?
The one person who apparently visited the house and found them dead was somebody who was due to come to the house. It was a workman. But nobody up until that period, I don't know about you, but if I don't speak to my parents for a couple of days, I'm thinking, oh, that's weird, check in with them. It just seems a very, very odd. He did live his life in the end, apparently, as a recluse, and he had his favourite kind of steak restaurant, favourite place to kind of hang out at the weekend. Nobody really had seen him for many years. The last movie was decades ago.
But no one's challenging the idea that actually this is all natural causes and just a tragic chain of events.
I think it's turning out to be like a CSI investigation, isn't it? A chain of events, unfortunate events, that has resulted in the whole family being found dead, along with the dog. But then some of the dogs were still alive. So I do think there's stuff that we don't know. I knew straight away, as soon as the Santa Fe authorities in New Mexico said nothing fishy here, I was like, this cannot be the case. It's got to be. There's got to be a few factors here.
There's some. It is sort of like one of those. It's almost impossible. It's a 1 in a million chance.
Yes.
That she died of some rodent disease, and then a week later, because I mean, we don't know the state of his condition, do we?
No.
With his Alzheimer's, we don't know how poorly he was with that, how aware.
And he
was
had a
of
heart
his
defect as
surroundings.
well. He was wearing a pacemaker and stuff. So there may have been a few things at play.
What
Literally,
happened to the dog?
we don't know. And a couple of the dogs were alive. So it's really bizarre that I think one dog was found in a cupboard. So it's a really great. You know, the trouble is, it's really awful because I feel like, you know, I've grown up watching his movies. So now when you see the films, you can't help but thinking, oh, this wasn't the way that it was supposed to end for him, you know. So, but watch this space. There's $80 million out there that could just be dissolved back into the state, I suppose. But we'll have a little look at this. The other story I wanted to cover was, I don't know how excited you are about this, but the excitement's building. Oasis
I'm
getting
not
back
excited
together.
at all. I'd rather they just stayed in retirement. I never liked them when they were, you know, big in the 90s. I like them even less now when I've got more discerning taste.
But you know, okay, so Wonderwall is a fantastic song. Have you ever been somewhere in public and that song's come on?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course I
that is
have.
really such a special song that really just it really represented that. I mean, it's 30 years ago now that
I know,
it came
it's
out.
amazing,
Isn't that
isn't it?
amazing?
Yeah.
So we've just launched Virgin Radio Britpop because we thought it'd be really good to mark all those albums celebrating.
See, I was
their
always a
30
Blur
year-
girl.
See, now there we are. So you like,
Yeah.
but don't they like Supergrass? All right, Blur Country House.
Suede, I loved Suede. Pulp.
Cast were in yesterday with Chris Evans playing
Oh,
their songs. Remember when we...
Manson.
Yes.
Nisha James. Well, James is my favourite. I've told you this before, Steve. Where's my
Amazing.
free James tickets?
All
I
right,
love James.
I'll sort it out.
Yeah,
I'll
when
sort
they
out a
come
private
across
gig
your
just
desk.
for you.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Get Tim Booth in here. I
So
love
the
him.
rumour is that Oasis will start rehearsing in May. At the moment, it's saying they're not sure if the brothers are going to get back together for the rehearsals. I think we're going to be feeling this right up until. Remember, there's 19 dates. They're in July. The first one is the first weekend of July in Cardiff. It's going to be all eyes on that gig. But I was chatting to John Powers, the lead singer of Cast. They're warming up for Oasis this summer.
Right.
And he said it's going to be really emotional, you know. So they're going to be the band warming up for Oasis just before Oasis step on. In their wildest dreams did they think they'd be at a stadium in front of 100,000 people 30 years on from those songs coming out.
What's amazing, there has been a bit of a sort of 90s resurgence. And it's funny because in the 90s, you know, we looked back at the 60s, let's say. And
Yeah.
it felt like a gazillion years ago. The makeup, the fashion, everything. It just seemed like a whole new different world. Whereas now it's hard to imagine that the 90s were 30 years ago. But there is a resurgence, isn't there? Like the fashion and the music.
Do you know, every single documentary that's come out recently that features stuff about the 90s is absolute box office stuff. This Boyzone documentary that came out recently.
Oh, I loved the boy bands one. That was on BBC.
And you know
Loved
this,
it.
you know when you see the fans and you realise. I think the thing is with the 90s is for most of us, it takes us back to a happier place.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know if it's looking at life with rose-tinted spectacles, but it seems
it was a better world back then.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
We had all the technological, well, not all the technological advancements. It's sort of the beginning of internet before internet became like a monster.
Yeah.
Before social media, so people actually went out and they spoke to each other and they went to the pub. And then, you know, when you look back at all the old music and football, loads of sort of, you know, black faces, brown faces, but no one banged on all the time about racism. We just got on with it.
I think a couple of things is maybe, you know, when we were younger, maybe we weren't that aware because we were out having a good time, but also we weren't watching and aware of the news all day long. We weren't scrolling and looking at things and being given so much information. So maybe we were just a bit more kind of.
But there was an economic boom
innocent.
period. It's sort of like, you know, post-Thatcherite. Britain was a great place to be.
It
People
felt
were
like a big
earning
thing,
good money.
didn't it?
It was the start of short-haul flights and people able to go on holiday to Spain. It was super exciting. It was such an optimistic time. And
the main thing I love is when you look back at the Oasis did a gig at Nebworth. That's celebrating its 30th anniversary next year. But you look back at 100,000 people and not one phone in that crowd. Everybody's focused on that stage in the moment, loving the moment, you know, making memories and stuff. And we don't have that anymore, do we?
We don't.
You know, you see people scrolling all the time and what have you.
Right.
But yeah, it's
As
interesting
it should
stuff.
be, quite frankly. Right, we're going to take a break now, but when we come back, you've got even more entertainment to bring us, so don't go anywhere. It's the last half hour of the show with me. It's been a wonderful 3.5 hours. Stay tuned for the last half hour. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Oh, you should have heard Steve and I during the advert break. He's like, what do you think of this? Don't like it. What do you think of that? Don't like it. Have you watched this? Yeah, didn't like it. Like, with me and pop culture, it's just...
I feel like I'm in Sniper's Alley with this...
Yeah, I'm like, you know, and then finally he said Enya, and I was like, ooh, yeah,
Yes.
I don't mind a bit of Enya. She lives in a castle with loads of cats, my kind of woman.
So I just asked you during the outbreak, I said, Alex, what's your thoughts on Madonna? Because I'm a serious fan, right? I've seen her 27 times since 1990. You know, like, everyone has an artist they love.
Yeah, see, mine is James. I've seen them 14 times. Yeah.
So what's wrong with Madonna?
Well, what's right with her?
Go on.
I just don't. I think her music's a bit rubbish. I think that she's a bit rubbish. I don't know. I just don't like her.
Well, listen, the rumour is there's a poster she's put out on Instagram that the new album's coming. There was an album she released 20 years ago, you know, with Hung Up, the song with the ABBA sample on. Brilliant. Her last massive #1 single. She's gonna do... I'm not singing it, guys.
I love this game. It's like when people talk to me about football, the eyes glaze over.
I might play it on my phone. But anyway, if you're a fan of Madonna, it's the last big album she released, and the rumour is Confessions Part 2 is coming out. It would seem that she's had a bit of a... It's been a tough thing being a fan of hers over the last 10 years because she's looked weird, strange things have happened. You're like, is she okay? But it would seem after the Greatest Hits tour, she's kind of recognised where her fan base are and what they want, and that this album is a back to basics. Give us the pop songs that we can sing along to. Give us another live show. Play the hits. So hopefully things are kind of... She's 65, you know, and she, you know, when Madonna passes away, she will be somebody that will be... I mean, she's the queen of pop. All those other people from the 80s have passed away. She's really the only one still going. And she's been knocking around now for 40 years. So you've got to give her that.
But can't she learn to wear clothes now? She's like a pensioner.
I mean, yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's the thing, I think. But the trouble is, her set of songs have never been about coming on a stall and singing songs, you know, to people in nightwear and what have you. She's more, you know, kind of...
Well, look, I always think we live in a free world. You know, I wouldn't choose to go to a Madonna concert, but loads of people adore her. And that's the brilliant thing. There's someone out there for everyone.
Exactly, and there's nothing better than loving an artist and following someone. You know, some people choose football, I choose Madonna.
And actually, what I like is the idea that people are still making albums, because the art of the album has almost perished, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
I remember being a kid and going to HMV and getting like the latest CD from James, the latest album, and you'd listen it from track 1 to track 12.
And you read the booklet.
The secret track, you read the booklet, and you'd be really excited, and then you kind of knew the whole catalogue of songs. Now we just go on sort of Spotify and things like that and cherry pick the odd thing here and there.
I must say, though...
Did the charts exist, really?
Well, yeah,
the
charts have changed,
It's not like, you know, they're sort of getting together, this is number one and everyone knew it. And
do you remember you didn't know back in the day who was at number one until literally, you know, maybe 5 minutes before. So you kind of worked out who was at number one. And you could have a record that could get into the chart of 40 and then 8 weeks later build up to the number one. Now they kind of pop in and they're out again before you can even blink. So it's interesting. Lots of people are buying vinyl again, which I love, because vinyl is like a collector's item. And it's actually owning something. So I'm all for it. I'm all for that. But artists only make big money now by touring. That's the big bucks. And obviously ticket prices have gone up. If you're going to go and see Oasis this year, you're paying like, you know, £400.
It's crazy now. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, I used to go to theatre a lot. I used to love going to concerts. I don't bother anymore because it's just so expensive.
Theatre's still cheaper if you're clever about it. If you book the tickets in advance or you just go like the last minute. So, but yeah, you're right, concerts, those tickets have really ramped up. Can I talk about the greatest thing I've seen on TV? Now, this is something that I think you will like. I don't know if you started watching it. Adolescence on Netflix.
I started watching it yesterday.
What do you think?
It's very gritty, it's very British. So far, so good. Yeah, I quite like it. The reason I started watching it is because I was in here yesterday doing my show and there was a whole hubbub down in your section of floor 17 and everyone's like at the window of the Virgin Studios taking photos, and I was like, who's in it now? Because, you know, sometimes there's like, you know, you never know who's going to pop out of that studio. It's like Serena Williams comes out and I was like, who's that? And it was Stephen Graham and I was like, oh, I quite like that guy. And people were like, oh yeah, have you heard he's got a new programme out? So I actually went and watched it, started watching it,
Lots of people are saying this is quite like Boiling Point. Stephen Graham does this great thing, is in these shows where, so this Adolescence is 4 parts. They filmed it as one continuous scene. It's so clever. The work that must have gone into this. So the camera never breaks. You're following, you know, it starts with this 14-year-old and the police knocking down his front door and arresting him, and he's accused of killing a classmate, stabbing a classmate, and it's taking you from that situation. The first episode is the police knocking down the door, arresting the boy, then you've got the family and the kids in custody. It's so powerful. There's possibly the last 5 minutes of the first episode is this breakdown scene with the dad and the child, and apparently the child, Owen Cooper, has never acted before.
Really?
He turned up to the rehearsal after just being in a drama club. And it was Stephen Graham who went, that's him.
That's my boy.
That's him. That's him. And the level of emotion, you know, and it toys with you because you've got this kid who stabbed somebody and killed somebody, but you're kind of like, you're with him on this journey as his, you know, strip search.
The motivation.
Go through
I'm still not sure he did the stabbing.
Interesting. I'm only on episode number 2, but it's the best thing. People are saying it's the greatest thing since Baby Reindeer last year. It's totally different, but
what I really love about when the Brits make drama, it's always like a 4-parter, a 6-parter. It's gritty, it's real, it's not overacted, it's not hammed up. It's people that you just, you know, would find about you in society. The scenes are very British. It's a very British-looking school.
Absolutely.
The actors and actresses look like ordinary folk, and it really delves into stuff without too much repetition. And you have to really, it draws you in. Compare that to American dramas, which is like 20 episodes per season. You know, people rave about Breaking Bad, but I'm like, this is just ridiculous now.
I mean, that was,
you know, the characters stop being like real people. They start becoming, you know, caricatures, and there's way too many episodes. The plot line gets way too convoluted. I can't deal with watching American dramas. I just turn off after a while because they've lost me.
Interesting
but British dramas are gripping.
It's interesting you mentioned American dramas. I would say this has picked up a lot of... Do you remember The West Wing back in the day? UK, and they did this thing where they would have a big scene and the camera would go through, the White House into different rooms. And the organisation that must go in to film one of those, and especially the classroom scenes with this, it's all done as one. The cameras are going zipping in and out. It's just incredible. I haven't seen anything this good in so long. So start on episode 1. It's the kind of thing when you start this weekend, by the end of the weekend you would have seen all 4.
It's a nice four-parter.
It certainly is. It doesn't hang around. In fact, actually, it could probably do with another episode, but less is more. The acting is utterly superb. So there you go. Best thing I've seen in ages.
Oh, it's nice to have something to watch. OK, now you're going to talk to me about Lady Gaga and Enya.
Yeah, some stuff on tonight. This is a real random thing. So it starts with the Lady Gaga night at 8:30 tonight. She's done some great stuff, with Tony Bennett over the years. The acting, some of it's been better than others, but it's a snapshot of all the performances at the BBC. She does some really nice kind of stripped-back versions of her songs. Then they're going into a St Patrick's special with Enya. So it's Enya at the BBC. So you remember Orinoco Flow and beautiful Caribbean Blue and beautiful songs like that.
The thing is, it's very uncool to like Enya, and I'm not saying I go home and light my incense sticks and put on my Enya. I don't. But what I like about Enya is she actually made these really complex original compositions of actual music.
Yep.
She's an artist.
Nobody else got in the charts with that stuff.
So much today is just someone going, with just some sort of rubbish, computerised drum beat behind it. And I'm like, it's great. It's nice to have sort of real music.
Yeah, I think you'll look at this tonight and you'll think, gosh, Orinoco Flow was out in 1988. She was so ahead of her time. And also, you look to when I used to go to Woolworths and those records were in the top 40 and what have you, there was nothing else like it. You had Bon Jovi and your Stock Aitken and Waterman stuff, the odd Madonna record, but Enya stood out like a shining beacon of really great music. So there's all her best bits, Snow Patrol's best bits, Gary Lightbody's incredible lead singer from Banger.
I do like Snow Patrol. That sort of really reminds me of sixth form. I remember a boy once making me a mixtape and 50% of it was Snow Patrol. It was sort of the music of my youth.
And what happened in that relationship?
I don't know. I hope he's well.
No,
I think we just stayed friends. But it was sweet, back before kids started sending each other naked selfies. We used to make each other mixtapes. It was all very innocent.
Yeah, we love looking back on those days with kind of fond memories. I mean, the 90s as well.
This is it, the 90s.
If I can just plug it, give Virgin Radio Britpop a listen. It's our brand new pop-up station. Get the Virgin Radio UK app. Basically, it's just all your favourite Britpop songs. It will bring back so many memories. Being in your 20s, being at college, Chris Evans doing TFI. We've got interviews with the band, so that's all good.
I saw Chris in makeup the other day. We were sort of in there at the same time, and I was like, "Can you just bring it back? It would nothing like it ever existed since."
No.
Big Breakfast, TFI Friday, that sort of gonzo presenting. Everything like a house party. It was so much fun. It had such great energy, and nothing exists. And I said, "Bring it back, Chris."
What did he say?
He's like, nah, it's had its time. I'm like, come on, don't be lazy.
For one episode, come on.
Because it was just really good. But that sort of, I remember as well, there was something lovely about being a girl in the 90s. I'm going to get my little sort of pseudo-feminist side of me out now, which is you look at the moment that young girls are being told you've got to look like a Kardashian. It's all hypersexualized, contouring, makeup, lips plumped up, boobs, bums, have to have a handbag, promiscuity,
everything, and it's all because of Instagram and
But it's sort of like everyone has like a sex doll. In the 90s, the legends were people like Zoe Ball, Sarah Cox. It was I can wear baggy trousers and a vest top and drink a pint of lager as well. And it was such a lovely period to be a woman. It was a real sort of, there was something great about it. There was an innocence and a fun and an energy.
I look back and I'm so lucky to have been in my 20s in that decade and actually old enough to work and to go out and to enjoy some of that live music and to be there and to be present and to be in the moment.
I can remember when I was at university, my friends and I saying, oh, if only we'd been like, I mean, I'm glad I'm not as old as you. But, sort of saying it would have been fun in the 90s actually to be at the age where we were sort of going out and working and not just sort of, kids at school. But it was a great decade, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And there was lots going on. You had, your Spice Girls and stuff. So you had the pop, and you had the Oasis Blur thing, and you had
the beginnings of sort of not the beginnings, but hip hop rap, because I really liked hip hop and rap in the 90s, my sort of Dr. Dre's and all of that. And yeah, there was a huge diversity of music and culture, and everyone was enjoying bits of everything.
Yeah.
And,
Well, a couple of snapshots. May I recommend the Boyzone documentary? It's so good. It's on Sky. Even if you didn't like Boyzone, it's a great snapshot of where we were at in the early part of the 90s. And there's also a great documentary on the BBC iPlayer called When Nirvana Came to Britain. You remember Kurt Cobain, Nirvana? They came over to Britain in like 1991, before they were famous, and they performed. There's people up north in pubs, where they basically put the boys up before they were even famous, and then they became this huge grunge band. Of course, Kurt passed away, and now they're like, just absolute kind of legends. And it's interesting to see where they started and what we looked like in the early 90s, what we were wearing, our attitudes.
The good news is for us, there wasn't digital cameras, there wasn't social media, so actually it's sort of like, you might have one of those old sort of your processed photos, but actually
you had to really make a picture to put a lot of effort into making a picture.
Those pictures get to stay where they belong,
Thank
in the
goodness
dustbin of history. Oh, Steve, it's been wonderful having your company. You've really brightened my day. So I'm going to go home, watch all the sport, and finish off watching Adolescence.
Perfect. Lovely to see you.
I might even watch the St Patrick's Day special, because Lady Gaga and me. But anyway, Snow Patrol. I'm in. Steve Denyer, thank you ever so much. Right, so going to take a short break now, but when I come back, it's the opportunity for you to get in touch and round off the show, giving me your thoughts. 03444 499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your standard network rate. Hopefully I'll speak to some of you after this. Otherwise, I've got lots of messages to get through. I'll see you in just a moment.
This is going to be her interviewing, so it says, leading female business owners and discovering their journey. Well, if you listen to the Archetypes one that she produced before, it was basically her sort of talking and not engaging with her guests. She's got to change this, the way of approaching it and actually trying to get something out of the people. She's not particularly good at that. You even see it in the cooking program. It's all about her, and the guests were never really felt as if they were part of it.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back. It's the final few moments of the show, and I said it's all about you, so let's do just this. We're going to play out your voice notes, which I've been negligent about so far for the last 4 hours. So let's have a listen to Anna, who's in Surrey.
Morning, Alex. I nursed my best friend through her last hours, minutes, seconds, and I cannot tell you what a nasty end it was. I don't want to go through that, and it should be my choice as to whether I take my own life before I have to scream in agony at the end. That's my choice. You're looking at a government that doesn't take care of us whilst we're alive. Why would they take care of us when we're near death? It doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, love your show, Alex. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, very emotive message there from Anna in Surrey, talking, of course, about assisted dying, which we were discussing earlier on in the programme. And it is a very difficult issue. I'm going to say I'm torn on it. I probably am torn on it. I mean, I think my gut tells me I don't want to live in a country where doctors can help kill someone, essentially. And what I'd rather do is explore all of the options for proper palliative care, proper hospice care, fully funded first. And I do worry about there being a slippery slope when it comes to assisted dying. In other countries that have implemented it, we've seen young women in their mid-20s ending their lives, being, medically killed because they say they're depressed or have mental health issues. And so this worries me. But then I hear what Anna said. I also think back to my late uncle, who himself considered dignitas because of his chronic condition, MS. And you think, yeah, we wouldn't treat animals like that. So it's really difficult, and perhaps it's right that it's been brought back up for debate. All I say is that this debate has to be thorough. It has to listen to all points of view. We have to use difficult language in this debate. It's all very well sort of constantly focusing on the dignity in dying, and it is about dignity. We need dignity in end-of-life care as well. It's a tough one. Anna, thank you ever so much for your message. Really important that we played that one out. Right, let's listen now to Carl, who wants to talk about Keir Starmer.
Hi, Alex. Carlin Berry. I can't believe how everybody's talking, all the mainstream media, as though Keir Starmer is like the saviour of the Ukraine, and he's like pushing for peace, and he's some big kingpin. For months and years, he's never even talked about peace. It's all Trump, this. And all of a sudden, Starmer's coming in, making out he's like Trump's number two, and he's going to pull in all these countries, and he's going to bring peace to the Ukraine. I think a reality check needs to come in.
Well, I think, Carl, judging by your message, you've seen through it. You've seen through the sort of performance routine, the propaganda. I dare say a lot of the British public have seen through it as well. But compared to other people, he's not looking so bad on the world stage, is he? I'm not going back to sort of shower him with praise and say I'm now, his number one fan. Far from it. But he is using the opportunity. I think we can definitely say that. Right, here is Nick talking about Lindsay Hoyle, because, of course, the story in front page of the Mail today is that yet again Lindsay Hoyle's got himself into a spot of bother. This time it's giving a former lobbyist access to the top tiers of our political world, and apparently this person has also given him some little gifts. He, of course, strongly denies any allegations, but it's not the first time we've seen Lindsay Hoyle in the spotlight for potentially, enjoying the odd freebie. Let's have a listen to what Nick thinks.
Morning, Alex and Duncan. It's Nick Moore here from Loughborough. I'm sick and tired of people saying that, well, Lindsay Hoyle broke no rules. Of course he didn't break any rules. They make the bloody rules to suit themselves. They make the rules to the extent that they can't break any rules because they absolve themselves from any responsibility. They really make me want to spew. Have a good weekend.
Why, thank you. Now, of course, it is the Speaker's job to make most of the rules as well, so it smacks of even more hypocrisy. I've always quite liked Lindsay Hoyle, though. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Burko. He was entertaining, but who was? But Lindsay just, you know, he comes across as a nice northern man. You know, certainly there's a campaign against him, some might say, from the Daily Mail, who are trying to cast him in a different light, and it ain't looking good. Let's listen now to Jacqueline. She's talking about what Duncan Barks and I were talking about earlier, which is the proliferation of all of these things on high streets, whether they're vape stores, Turkish barbers, souvenir shops, American candy stores on Oxford Street, which I've said, are they just a front for money laundering? This is what Jacqueline has to say.
Alex, if what you're saying is true, that these are money laundering shops and that it's all to do with crime, then how comes the council are allowing these people to rent these shops? And why isn't a big, massive investigation being done by the police, the Home Office and the council collectively? I think we should start all boycotting these kind of shops. I mean, I make it my business, I'm sorry, not to go into a non-speaking English shop anymore now. I won't use their news agencies. I will go to anywhere bar these shops now. And I won't buy halal meat either. It's just ridiculous what's happening in this country.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I don't find myself going into the souvenir shops of London that have proliferated down my street. Why would I want to? What are they going to sell that I want to buy? You ask a very important question there, Jacqueline, about why aren't councils doing anything about it? Why do they keep repeatedly giving premises to these businesses? Aren't they looking, going, they've already got 10 Turkish barbers here, we don't need another? I don't know whether there's a bit of this going on, you know, a little bit of I don't think we're as pure a society as perhaps we believe. But look, I don't know. It does beg a belief that we essentially have, you know, what to me seems like blatant criminality just, you know, right in front of us. No border force going along going, oh, hold on, who are these people working on Nail Bar? Who's this in the hand car wash? I don't know why this is brazenly taking place. Right, now let's listen to David talking about Putin.
Good morning, Alex. The reference to this Putin up for a fight. Putin is always up for a fight as long as the smaller opponent. He's like the school ground, playground, bully. Once you give him your pocket money, he'll come back for the sweets. If you don't give him the sweets, he'll give you a bloody nose. And this is what's happening. And this is all because of Trump. Trump dressed down Zelensky in the Oval Office in front of all the media, and Putin started to rub his hands. You give him to one thing, he's like a crocodile. He'll come back for more. Good show, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, interesting there. But here's another opinion on that from Dan in Ealing saying, I'm sick to death of hearing Trump doesn't know what he's doing. You can't read him. His team doesn't have a clue. They're being played. Well, answer this. How far did the previous experts get to peace in Ukraine? Or how did they do with the Middle East over the last 50 years? He at least has a go at trying to achieve something that his gutless predecessors just shrugged their shoulders at. I mean, that is true. One can say that Donald Trump is doing things differently, and if he's got results, maybe he will be exonerated. Nick Moore says, Alex Philip Ingram, a military expert, just said Putin's military isn't strong enough to punch through Ukraine's defences. Why then should we believe that Putin would attempt to take the Baltic states and the rest of the former Soviet empire? Both cannot be true. Well, if Philip was here, and he's not, he's gone to enjoy the rest of his day, he might say, well, that's because they haven't rearmed, but perhaps that is potentially Russia's agenda. And Kev Mears from Shropshire says, Alex, nonsense that everything that is Trump is unpredictable, as that's what makes it predictable. If people like Philip Ingram were in charge, however nice a man he is, this war would last for decades. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see peace. Everyone wants to see peace, kumbaya and all of that. And I think I've just got to have hope that Trump has a strategy, because certainly whatever one thinks of Trump, America has plenty of military personnel, great intelligence services, people in the Pentagon who've been in those positions for years. Hello, someone else who's been in his position for, I don't know how long, 2 years, 3 years?
Too long?
Too long? Oh, never too long. We can't get enough of you, Cardi P. Loaded question, I'm going to go with yes, but frankly, no. Anyway, what's coming up in your show?
Well, I'll tell you in a second, but just that point I thought was really interesting about, you know, talking about peace, seeing what Trump is doing. About a month, 6 weeks ago, Trump was talking about peace in Ukraine. He was talking about raising defence spending. look what's happened. You know, there's some strategy there, definitely.
Well, this is it. I mean, there are reverberations taking place. Before, nothing was happening. No one was talking. The war was going on. Starmer's stash is, we'll just carry on giving $3 billion as long as it takes. I'm like, that's not a plan.
And look at what Rubio said yesterday about Hamas terrorists, for example. I'd love to have heard that kind of very strong rhetoric coming out of the Biden administration, but we just didn't hear it. We'll talk a little bit about that today. We'll also talk about the disability benefits crackdown. We've got the Labour MP for South Shields on. Will she be happy enough to vote for 1 million people to lose their benefits? We'll also talk about the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which she's backing. We've got the Veterans Minister on as well, Al Cairns. He's a former Special Boat Service. We can't even talk about a lot of the stuff he did. An Afghanistan veteran who won the Military Cross. So if you are a veteran, or if you have someone in your family who's a veteran and you want to know what's going to happen, very interesting words from him yesterday, actually, when he said, as the government prepares to reform the very welfare state's disability benefit system, many veterans will be feeling anxious about what that could mean for them. Very interesting for a government minister to write that. So